Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto was sent to shinobi-less dimension with yandere Rukia K movie? Shanaru. Sakura shouted as her fist connected with the ground, destroying the earth and creating a crater with a 2-kilometer radius. Naruto took it as his cue to jump in and he rushed towards their enemy with a Rasengan in his hand. Both of them had been sent on a mission to capture a rogue nin whose powers were still unknown. From their fight, they knew that he could shift through dimensions, which was a really strong jutsu. How he got that power, it was still unknown. Katsuro dodged Naruto's Rasengan by jumping away to the left but received a sideways kick from Sakura which sent him crushing into a nearby tree. Both ninjas eyed him warily as he recollected his bearings. "You two ninjas are quite a nuisance, eh?" he said as he wiped the blood from his mouth. "Just what are you?" Sakura asked, eager to know what the guy really was. "I can't tell you. Otherwise you'd know how to defeat me," he said and laughed maniacally. "We're gonna defeat you for sure, Datbeo," Naruto shouted to the rogue ninja. Katsuro's mouth twisted into an angry frown. "You'll never defeat me," he snarled like an animal. He straightened himself up. "Now time for the grand finale," he said as he cracked his knuckles. Both Naruto and Sakura steeled themselves for whatever was coming. In one moment he was standing in front of them, in the next he was behind both of them. "Say goodbye to this world," they heard him laugh before being engulfed in a blinding light. "Come on Ichigo. Let's go," Rukia said as she pulled the orange-haired boy out of bed. "Why do we have to go anyways? It's not like it's a big deal," the said boy mumbled angrily as he got out of his bedcovers. He was still tired from his previous fight against an annoying hollow. Plus homework and his weirdo of a family, the boy was clearly exhausted. "There has been a disturbance in the spiritual balance. Byakuya said we should go over there and see what's happening," the raven-haired girl replied. Ichigo sighed tiredly. "How troublesome," he thought. "Heads up," he heard Rukia say. He turned around and his face collided with her fist. The two Shinigami jumped from rooftop to rooftop. "You could have given me a heads up," Ichigo grumbled as he touched his cheek, recalling how Rukia had punched him square in the face without a warning. "I did. You just didn't pay attention," the girl replied nonchalantly. He glared at her before looking back ahead. "What's that?" Rukia asked as she pointed to what looked like a shooting star. It was huge and glowing a bright blue. It was flying way too close to Earth. Then it split into two and the other half went off in a random direction, out of eyesight. "Could that be what's causing the disturbance?" Ichigo asked as he stood on top of a mall. Rukia nodded. "Don't worry Rukia. I'll solve this," the male Shinigami said as he grinned. Ichigo wait. But the boy had already jumped in the air towards the glowing object. "I bet it's alien," he said to himself as he neared the object in the air. He drew out his Zanpakuto. "Let's finish this Zangetsu," he said as he poised his Zanpakuto to strike the object. Sakura seemed to be flying in the air. She struggled to recollect herself as wind whipped at her. She looked down below and saw a lot of lights. Probably a city, she thought. The Just You Katsuro had performed on her and her blonde best friend was not known for her. What was that? She thought to herself. You can think about that later. Right now you're falling to your death, inner Sakura reminded her. She looked to see that she was quickly losing altitude. I can't land on my feet otherwise they'd break. And if I crash, I'm probably gonna die, she told herself. But if I can punch the ground, she thought absent-mindedly. With that, she resolved to punch the ground when she landed to reduce the impact. She channeled chakra to her right fist and poised it. As he drew closer, Ichigo saw the silhouette of a person. There's a person, he thought. Just 2 meters away from the center of the flying object, Ichigo saw a fist poised for attack. Say wa, he said to himself, mouth agape. He was too slow react and the flying fist crushed into his face. She was hearing voices. Unfamiliar voices. And unfamiliar voices meant you were in enemy territory. Is she okay? My face still hurts from her punch. Where did she come from? Why does she have pink hair? Her forehead is pretty large asterisk snicker but I like it, it's cute. I think she's pretty. Can you guys just shut up? She's waking up. Sakura opened her eyes to meet face to face with brown eyes. She blinked lazily as her foggy mind tried to recollect what had happened. She looked to the side and saw 2 girls looking at her with concern, one with long orange hair and another with short raven hair. She looked to the other side and saw 2 boys and a teddy bear looking at her curiously. One had black hair with glasses and the other with brown hair which covered his eyes. She looked back up and saw the same brown eyes. The guy was close, way too close for her liking. As the final pieces clicked into place and she processed her situation, she screamed. Slap. Sakura looked at the 4 people surrounding her. She had never seen them before. Their clothes were weird. They weren't ninja clothes. Heck, even civilians dressed better than them. Who are you guys? She asked in a steel voice. The question is, who are you? The boy she had slapped earlier asked. She had called him a pervert. Why had he been too close at her face anyway? I'm Sakura. Sakura Haruno, she said. I'm a ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village and I'm a chunin, she concluded. Sakura, huh? The raven-haired girl said absent-mindedly. Ichigo Kurosaki. I'm 16 and a shinigami, the boy with the orange hair said. Rukia Kuchiki. I'm 16 and a soul reaper, the raven-haired girl said. Orihime Inoue. The girl with orange hair and a pretty big chest said in a small voice. Sounds like Hinata, the kunoichi thought. Uryu Ishida, the guy with black hair and glasses said. Kinda reminds me of Sasuke with his dark hair and eyes, she thought. Yasutora Sato. But you can call me Chad, the bulky boy said. And lastly but not least is Khan. The teddy bear exclaimed loudly. A talking teddy bear. Sakura asked puzzledly. Long story, Ichigo said warily. Do you know how you came here? Rukia asked. Sakura held her chin in deep thought. I was fighting Katsuro with Naruto. Wait. Where's Naruto? Sakura asked frantically. Who's that? Uryu asked. My teammate. Didn't you see him? The pink-haired medic asked. When I was approaching you, I saw something split off and go into another direction, Ichigo explained. Oh, the medic nin said, her eyes downcast. She couldn't live in a foreign land knowing that her best friend was out there all alone. Don't worry. We'll find him, Ichigo said quickly, seeing her sudden change in mood. Yeah, she replied with a tad bit of hope. You didn't finish your story, Chad reminded her. Oh yeah. I was fighting Katsuro. He's a rogue ninja who can shift through dimensions from what I know so far, Sakura said. You were fighting a ninja? You mean, you're a ninja? Ichigo said in realization. Of course I am. I said that I'm a chunin. Don't you know what a chunin is? Sakura asked, shocked. They all shook their heads. Then that means you aren't ninja, she said. They all nodded. Rukia and I are both soul reapers, soul reapers. Are you gonna rip my soul out of me? She asked as she stood from her sitting position. Not like that, Ichigo said. We save lost souls and bring them to the Soul Society, Rukia explained. Sakura looked at them as though they had grown a second head. After explaining what soul reapers were, what the Soul Society was and what each of them were, Sakura had a brief idea about each of them. Where do you come from? Orihime asks. I'm from the Hidden Leaf Village, one of the ninja villages in the 5 elemental nations. I'm a medical ninja and a chunin, Sakura said. She went on to explain briefly about her world and the mission she had been given. It wouldn't do much good to reveal herself to the enemy. I'm guessing that Katsuro guy sent you into another dimension in your last fight, Rukia said calculatively. Probably, Sakura replied. But how do I get back? She asked herself. We'll think about that later. Right now, you have to rest, Orihime said. I'm fine, Sakura said as she stretched herself. Where are you gonna sleep? Uryu asked her. Oh, I can sleep in the forest until I find Naruto, she said casually. The forest? But it's dangerous, Orihime said concernedly. I'm used to it so no problem, the kunoichi replied, the Hinata of that world. You can sleep here, Rukia suggested. But Ichigo was cut short with a punch to the back of his head before he could protest. No thanks. I wouldn't want Ichi Perv to steal my virginity while I'm still 16, Sakura said with a shrug. Ichigo's face turned red with anger. Hey, who are you calling a perv? He complained but was brutally ignored. She can come over to my place, Orihime said. That would be a good idea, Uryu said. Sakura smiled. Don't worry, Orihime. I wouldn't want to bother you, Sakura said as she waved her hands. Don't worry. Besides, I live alone, so it's good to have some company, the redhead said gently. Okay, thanks, Sakura said as she smiled genuinely. Well then. Since that's settled, I guess we should go home and see what to do tomorrow, Rukia said. They all nodded in agreement. After everyone had left, Ichigo was left with Rukia. So do you like her? Rukia asks. What? Ichigo said, alarmed as his face turned red. Come on, spill. I saw the way you looked at her when she was looking away, she said teasingly. You're just making up your own theories, the Shinigami blurted as he crossed his arms over his chest. Rukia laughed in return. One day it'll be you, he muttered under his breath, which caused the girl to laugh harder. The next morning, Ichigo was surprised to see Sakura at school. I see you made yourself comfortable already, Ichigo said as he looked at Sakura from head to toe, seeing her dressed in their uniform which fitted her and complemented her figure. Yeah. Orihime helped me find a place here last night, saying I was a transfer student. I don't know how she did that, Sakura told him as she remembered how the girl chatted non-stop with the school head until she got a place. She had to admit that Orihime was a fun person to be with, even with her crazy food recipes. She got to know that she used to live with her brother before he died and got turned into a hollow. She saw a small similarity in her situation with Naruto's. She narrowed her eyes when she saw him continue to look at her. If you keep on looking at me like that, you're gonna undress with your eyes, she said before walking away, leaving a very embarrassed Ichigo behind. Damn it, he cursed himself. See? I told you so, Rukia said as she appeared beside him. He muttered something inaudibly before stalking off to his classroom. Rukia chuckled at his childish antics. In class, Sakura sat beside Orihime. She introduced her to the students there and got to know that they were quite the same like the people in her world. Some were nice like Orihime while others were bitchy. She was still getting used to this world. She had been introduced to cell phones which were used for communication. All she knew were messenger hawks and the techniques used by the Yamanaka clan. There were also televisions, fridges, cars and many other things. She could only look in awe as they were shown to her. Sakura proved to be an excellent student, or what they called a straight A student. The subjects were easy. Her best subjects were biology, chemistry and math. Ichigo and his friends only watched in utter shock as Sakura worked out the hardest equations like it was 1 + 1. You're very smart, Orihime commented as they are their lunch with the rest of the group. Yeah. I guess so, the pink-haired girl said with a shrug. You must be really strong then, she added enthusiastically. Sakura stopped chewing and looked at the sushi in her lunchbox as her expression became distant. What's wrong? Rukia asks. It's just that I'm not all that strong. I'm used to people always protecting me. I can't even protect my friends, she replied as she thought of the many times Naruto and Sasuke had protected and how she had failed to bring back Sasuke. The mood became suddenly hostile. Why don't you tell us about your friends at Konoha? Ichigo said abruptly, hoping to change the mood. Her face immediately brightened and Ichigo released a large exhale of relief. She began telling them about Naruto, Ino and her many friends at Konoha. Ichigo stared at her dreamily during the entire time as his mind captured the happiness radiating off her face and glowing in her eyes. He didn't see Orihime glance at him sadly out of the corner of her eye. Sakura was coming from shopping with Orihime and Rukia. She held 3 bags in each hand, same with the other girls. She had been telling them about Ino and how she would have loved the clothes here. They went to Orihime's and Sakura tried out all the clothes she had bought. They had lots of fun as the 3 girls got to know each other better. Suddenly, Rukia brought the topic of Ichigo up. So Sakura, what do you think about Ichigo? She asked casually. Well, he's a nice person. He has a nice smile and is a bit goofy. I called him a pervert the first time I saw, but I was just joking. He still didn't take it seriously, she said as she laughed at herself. He's not bad, just a person with a little rough edges, she concluded softly as she finished putting on her clothes. So how do I look? She asked as she twirled around in her floral summer dress. Great. Just great, Rukia said as she smirked, forgetting her answer. Orihime nodded slowly, her mind seemingly occupied. The group had decided to have dinner at Orihime's for the sake of Sakura to get comfortable with them. Ichigo was dressed in a black tee with jeans and white sneakers. Uryu was wearing a navy blue short-sleeved shirt and black pants with black shoes. Chad was wearing a burgundy shirt with the sleeves rolls up to his elbows and jeans with black tennis shoes. Orihime was wearing a long white skirt with a blue line running across it near the hem and a pink tee and sandals. Rukia was dressed in a blue dress and black flats. Sakura was clad in blue jean shorts and a black tee with a cherry blossom printed on the back and black slippers. They were sitting on the floor in a traditional Japanese style with the girls on one side and the guys on the other.
Kon was also there. Sakura was facing Chad, Rukia facing Ichigo and Orihime facing Uryu. Kon was alone with no one wanting to sit beside him.
I cooked today, so don't worry about Orihime's bizarre recipes, Sakura said with a smile as she noticed everyone eyeing the food skeptically. But my food tastes great, Sakura, the said girl protested as she put some ramen in her plate. I know, Orihime. I know, the pink-haired girl replied as she smiled at her new friend. Does the Soul Society know about Sakura? Ichigo asked as he ate miso soup. Rukia nodded. I sent a message to Byakuya telling him about Sakura and he said he was going to tell the seniors. He'll send feedback later, the raven-haired Shinigami said. Your food tastes really great, Sakura, Ichigo commented after downing a slice of strawberry shortcake in one go. Thanks, Sakura said as a faint blush dusted her cheeks, but this did not go unnoticed by Orihime. But Ichigo never commented my food, she thought out loud. What did you say, Orihime? The orange-haired boy asked. Everyone's attention had now diverted to her. She gulped. I said you never commented that my food tastes good, she said in a low voice. Everyone nodded. That's right, Ichigo. You never complimented her food, Uryu added. Well, it's not that Orihime isn't a good cook, but it's just that Sakura's tastes so good, he said, his voice heavy with honesty. Sakura gave him a small smile and he grinned in return. Only Rukia was aware of the jealousy vibes coming from Orihime. Nice clothes you're wearing, Kon complimented Sakura. Thanks, she replied. It brings out your nice figure, though you need to improve in the chest department, he added. His reply was being punched out of Orihime's apartment. After supper, everyone had played a game of cards. None of them knew that Sakura secretly used a genjutsu to see the other's cards and she won every game. You're cheating, Ichigo would say every time Sakura won. Sakura only chuckled in return. They finished at 12 midnight. Thanks for letting us spend the night here, Rukia said to Orihime. It was all Sakura's idea, the girl replied. Rukia sent the kunoichi a curious glance before bidding her good night. The others did the same. Good night, Sakura, Ichigo said softly. Good night, Ichi-perv, she said using his nickname. Ichigo only chuckled before ruffling her hair, then waving goodbye to Orihime. He's such a nice guy, isn't he? Orihime said as she longingly after Ichigo's retreating figure. Sakura looked at the girl with a curious expression before looking at the sky, thinking about Konoha and everyone there. See can't breath. Sakura, see-chan, Naruto sputtered through enstrangled gasps. Sorry, Sakura said as she released her blonde best friend. Naruto held his chest as he tried to regain oxygen. Sakura watched with soft eyes and a small smile as she finally felt complete now that her blonde was with her. Ichigo noticed this and thought, she's never looked at me that way. He cleared his throat then grinned at her. How are you, Sakura-chan? He asked. I'm feeling good now that you're here, she replied honestly. The shinobi blushed a cute shade of red that would put Hinata to shame as he scratched the back of his head. Don't take it the wrong way, Baka, she seethed as she smacked him on top of his head. Nay, Sakura-chan. What'd you do that for? The blonde complained as he massaged his throbbing head. Sakura only chuckled in return. Ichigo cleared his throat loudly. Ahem. We're still here, he muttered in a low yet audible voice. Oh. I forgot to introduce you, she said and she dragged Naruto over to the four friends. Naruto, this is Ichigo, Rukia, Uryu, Orihime and Chad. They're my new friends and they've been taking care of me this entire time, she said as she pointed to each one of them respectively. Hey guys. I'm Naruto Uzumaki and I'm gonna become Hokage, Datbeo. He proclaimed loudly. Is this guy gonna really become Hokage? Ichigo whispered to a dazzled Rukia, remembering how Sakura defined a Hokage. Thanks for taking care of Sakura-chan while I was away, he said in all truth and honesty. Ichigo elbowed a still dazzled Rukia for her to answer since she was the self-proclaimed spokesperson of their group. I mean you're welcome, she replied coolly as she nervously cleared her throat. Ichigo eyed Rukia out of the corner of his eye. What's with her nervousness? He thought as he noticed her shift uncomfortably. Sakura noticed several bruises all over Naruto and his clothes were battered and bloodied. You're hurt, she exclaimed as she observed him. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I forgot to tell you that I fought some bad guy called Aizen. He was tough though, but I beat him anyway. Says he'll come back for revenge whatsoever. the blonde said as he shrugged nonchalantly. You fought with Aizen and defeated him? Rukia exclaimed, her mouth agape. He nodded quickly with an eye-closed smile. Sakura noticed that all of them had shocked expressions on their faces. Who's Aizen? She asks. He's the most badass Shinigami to ever have existed, Ichigo replied as he recovered from his initial shock. Naruto gave him a puzzled look. He means the Madara of this world, she explained in easier terms. Oh, the blonde said as he smiled sheepishly. How did you do it? Rukia asked rather gleefully. Before Naruto could answer, Sakura had already done so. He'll explain while I'll heal him, she said, her medic antics kicking in. Naruto was lying down on Ichigo's bed facing the ceiling while Sakura worked on his bruises. The whole gang had been astonished when her hands glowed green and began healing the obnoxious blonde. Ichigo had even muttered a small, wow, as he stared at Sakura work like an expert on Naruto's wounds. So how did you defeat Aizen? Chad asks in a low but deep voice. At first I was going easy on him but I saw he was a tough opponent. So I asked the Kyuubi for some help and I defeated him, he explained rather plainly as his pink-haired best friend worked on a gash across his torso. Naruto, that's not a real explanation, Sakura commented as she face-palmed inwardly. What am I supposed to say? He whined like a child. Give a more wide explanation like the justice you used or something like that, she said as she moved to his chest. She removed his jacket and began to heal the nasty cut stretching from his shoulder to his stomach. I don't know how to explain it, he said lazily. Now you're starting to sound like Shikamaru, she commented. Naruto only stuck his tongue out, which earned him a smack to the side of his head. I think it has something to do with the chakra thing, Rukia said as she held her chin in deep thought. Chakra? Sakura asks. Rukia nodded. I don't know if this theory is true. In this world we use spiritual energy to fight, but you guys use chakra, which a part of you, not some spiritual thingy whatsoever. So it might be that you're using chakra instead of spiritual energy does the trick, she explained. But I still think there's something more to it rather than chakra, Sakura commented. What about having both spiritual energy and chakra? Ichigo said after a short pause. Sakura was able to sense a hollow a fair distance away where she is, he said as he thought of the many times Sakura had sensed hollows which were far away and had defeated them with just one punch.
You mean those black gigantic weirdo thingies? Naruto asked.
You met hollows? Rukia asks. He nodded. Met them a couple of few times. Easy to defeat though. I used a Rasengan on them, he said. Since you were able to sense them, you might have both chakra and spiritual energy, Ichigo concluded. I'm guessing your theory about having both spiritual energy and chakra might be true, Sakura said. I'll see if the theory is true, Rukia concluded as she decided on further researching on the area. Sakura finished healing all of her best friend's wounds. She stood up and stretched a bit. Those wounds were quite nasty. Took a large chunk out of my chakra reserves, she said sleepily as she swayed a little. Ichigo caught before she fell down. He made her sit down on the floor and kneeled beside her. Are you okay? Naruto asked, concern clearly evident in his voice. I'm fine, she said as she waved a hand. She leaned into Ichigo's chest and was soon snoring. She looks really cute, doesn't she? Naruto said as he admired his pink-haired teammate. Ichigo nodded slowly. Ichigo shifted in order to make Sakura lie on the floor, but that immediately woke her up. She moved away from the comfort of his chest. Sorry I fell asleep on you, she mumbled unapologetically as she sleepily rubbed her eyes. Think you need to rest, Ichigo said. I will after he gets a bath, Sakura said as she pointed to Naruto, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed.
What? Naruto stammered. I could smell your stench even in my sleep, she commented dryly. Sakura-chan, don't make bath at this time of the day, the blonde complained like a 3-year-old. If you don't go and take a bath, I'm going to punch you all the way to next week, she threatened as she waved her fist in the air. Naruto tried to protest but grumpily made his way towards the bathroom after seeing that she was not changing her mind.
So he's your teammate, Orihime said after Naruto had left. Yep, and best friend. Though he's quite a handful, she said as she gave the orange-haired girl a small smile. She massaged her temples as she frowned. Gosh, who knew that her chakra reserves had depleted this much? But it was understandable considering the many bruises and cuts that blonde had obtained. Maybe chakra exhaustion made the Kyuubi unable to quickly heal his wounds considering he had been involved in a fight with the greatest villain in this world. I better leave. It's getting pretty late, Uryu said as he stood up from his sitting position on the floor. Me too, Chad said as he shifted from his position of leaning beside the closet. The others bid farewell to two of their friends and they left. Sakura-chan. I don't have any clothes, Naruto shouted loudly from the bathroom. Sakura's eyebrow twitched in annoyance. Ichigo heard her mutter, "Dobi," darkly before turning to him with a big smile and sweetly asking him if he had some clothes to spare. He noticed that her smile was fake and strained. Probably trying to control her anger, he thought as he recalled how Rukia had done so on many occasions. He gave a weird look before walking over to his closet and pulling out a set of an orange t-shirt and black pants. He handed them over to Sakura, who in turn handed them over to Rukia and asked her to give Naruto the clothes as she yawned sleepily. Rukia agreed and left for the bathroom.
Rukia was standing on the door of the bathroom. Her hands were slightly trembling.
Her instincts were telling her that something big was going to happen once she opened that door. But she didn't know what it was. Her gut instinct never lied. She inhaled then exhaled. She braced herself for whatever was going to happen. She knocked once, but she got no answer. What's taking him so long? She thought impatiently. After knocking for the 5th time, she resolved to open the door herself and get inside. She turned the doorknob and entered the bathroom. Steam was everywhere so she couldn't make out anything in the bathroom. She walked towards the shower and a figure of a person. "Naruto?" she called out. "Yes," he replied. "I came with your clothes," she said. "Thanks. Let me just come over there and get them," he replied, and she heard wet footsteps coming towards her direction. She walked over the direction where the footsteps were coming from but slipped on the wet floor and fell forward. But before she had a faceplant, she felt arms wrap around her. She blinked in confusion before turning to meet the tanned chest of a certain Uzumaki boy. She screamed and shoved the boy away from her as if he were death himself. "Hey, are you okay?" Naruto asked concernedly. "Naruto, don't try to seduce Rukia in there," Sakura shouted from Ichigo's bedroom. Rukia nodded furiously as she thrust the clothes into his hands. She was out of the bathroom before Naruto could bat an eyelash. Naruto arrived 5 minutes later clad in the clothes Ichigo had given him. He noticed that Rukia wasn't in the room. "Thanks for the clothes, Strawberry," Naruto said to the Shinigami. "I'm not Strawberry," he replied annoyedly as his eyebrow twitched. "But your name means strawberry, so it's the same thing," the blonde replied as he shrugged. Ichigo decided to let it pass for now. "So where am I going to sleep?" Naruto asked himself. "You can come over to my place. There is enough space for another person," Orihime spoke for the first time since Naruto had arrived. "Nah. I wouldn't want to trouble you," the Jinchuriki politely declined. "No, really. It's okay. Sakura is staying with me," she urged. "Is that okay, Sakura-chan?" Naruto asked the kunoichi, but he wasn't answered as Sakura was sprawled out on Ichigo's bed, snoring her head off. "Okay. I'll come with you. Thanks anyway," he said to the girl. "No problem," she replied with a smile. "Now to get Sakura-chan home quickly," he said. "Shadow clone jutsu," he said as he did the single hand sign and another Naruto appeared. The original Naruto picked up Sakura bridal style. "You just tell me where you live and we'll get there really quick," Naruto said to a baffled Orihime. "Why yeah sure," she said as she recomposed herself. The clone Naruto picked her up bridal style. "Goodbye, Strawberry. Say good night to Rukia for me." With that, the blonde shinobi and his clone jumped out of the open window towards Orihime's. "So what do you think about Naruto?" Ichigo teasingly asked Rukia, who had emerged from the closet she had hidden in after seeing Naruto shirtless in the bathroom. "I just saw a real man," she said with stars in her eyes as she clasped both hands on her chest. Ichigo's sweat dropped anime style at her actions. It had been a week since Sakura arrived in this world. She had moments when she really missed being in Konoha, but fortunately she had the gang to keep her company, but it was never the same. She was struggling to stay awake in class. They were being taught math. She was so good at math that it was getting boring to be in a class she knew everything about. Ichigo had a poker face on, but he was really sleepy. He just didn't want to mess with his math teacher. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. He sensed a hollow a few blocks away from their school. He looked over to Rukia, who had also sensed the same thing. They had to get out of class, quick. He looked over to Sakura, whose posture had become rigid. Did she sense it too? He thought, wondering if she had those powers. She looked behind at him and their eyes connected. They seemed to be thinking the same thing, get out of class. She mouthed the words, don't worry, we'll get out soon. Then he saw her make these weird signs with her hands. He stared at her puzzledly. She stood up and walked over to him. Let's go, she said as she stood in front of his desk. There's that hollow thing, she stated calmly. He stared at her hard before saying, what about class? I got it covered, I'll explain later, she replied. Ichigo stood up and walked over to Rukia. Let's go, he said. But before she could ask about their teacher, he said, I'll explain later. She nodded and stood up. The three of them got out of class. Sakura looked back at the classroom, making sure that her genjutsu was firmly in place. The three students were facing an ugly-looking gigantic hollow which had 8 arms and a triangular head. It was a sickly black and had small beady eyes. It had introduced itself as Peacemaker. Ichigo had left his body locked up in the boys' bathroom. I'll get this done really quick and easy, he shouted to the hollow. Maybe I'll show off my skills to Sakura, he thought as he smiled like a 3-year-old. He let out a war cry and charged towards it. Peacemaker slashed one tentacle towards Ichigo. He dodged but didn't see another tentacle coming from behind. He was pushed back and he crashed into a nearby boulder. Sakura winced. That must have hurt, she mumbled to herself as she saw the male Shinigami struggle to stand up. Rukia gave the girl a sideways glance before looking back to the ongoing battle. Every time Ichigo tried to strike, a tentacle would appear from nowhere and strike him. The worst part was that the tentacles couldn't be cut. If they did, then they would regenerate. He grunted in annoyance as he slashed at 2 tentacles which quickly regenerated as soon as the previous tentacles left the hollow. Peacemaker grabbed his left leg and swung him in the air a couple of times which caused Ichigo to become dizzy before throwing him to the ground. He landed in a loud crash and left a large crater. Peacemaker laughed in return. Ha 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 ha. You'll never defeat me. I am the Peacemaker, the hollow said as to laughed maniacally. This is getting ridiculous. Rukia looked at Sakura to see her putting on black leather gloves. Sakura. The female Shinigami said questioningly. She didn't want to wait any longer and besides, she hadn't had a good fight in days. Time to wrap this up, she shouted to the hollow as she cracked her knuckles. What is she doing? Rukia thought to herself. Pumping chakra to her feet, Sakura jumped into the air towards Peacemaker. Peacemaker's tentacles reached out to grab Sakura. The kunoichi dodged all of them with great ease, silently thanking Tsunade for her training. She headed straight for the hollow's face. Shanaru, she shouted as she pumped chakra to her fist and punched her hollow straight in the face.
The blow hit badly and Peacemaker fell down to the ground due to the sudden force. Dust rose as he crashed into the ground. Sakura landed gracefully on the ground. She turned back to see Ichigo and Rukia's priceless expression. She smirked before turning back to Peacemaker. She walked into the dust and grabbed Peacemaker by the collar, ready to punch the living daylights out of him, only to find a 5-year-old boy in his stead. What the? She said as she dropped the sobbing boy to the ground.
She stared at the boy before kneeling down in front of him. Hey, are you okay? She asked gently. The boy only sobbed louder. Sakura frowned in deep thought. It was exactly as Rukia had said. The hollows were often lost souls who, if didn't manage to go to the Soul Society, they be hollowified. She stared at the little boy in pity. He probably died at a young age. What's your name? I'm not gonna hurt you, she said softly. The boy stopped crying and looked at Sakura whilst sniffing. My name is Menma, he stuttered. She winced inwardly as she thought of the time she went to another dimension with Naruto. It brought bad memories as to reminded her of the pain of not having parents. Rukia and Ichigo came and stood a few meters behind them. What happened? She asked gently. I don't know. I was with my mother, on our way to school. I had a presentation on world peace. Then I saw a big car coming towards us very fast, then everything went black, he said through muffled sobs. Sakura felt her heart bleed. It was unfair that Menma had to die at such a young age. Don't worry Menma. I'm gonna take you somewhere peaceful, the Chunin said as she laid his hand on top of his head. Menma glowed white before turning into a white butterfly and taking off into the sky. She looked at the butterfly for a while before turning back to meet the curious gazes of Ichigo and Rukia. Boy, she had a lot to explain. So you're saying that you pump chakra to your body parts to enhance your physical strength? Rukia asked as they sat in the cafeteria eating their lunch.
Sakura nodded. Pretty cool, Ichigo commented. What did you do to get out of class?
Orihime asks. I used a genjutsu. It's a technique that allows the user to alter the 5 senses of a human and cast an illusion on the victim through manipulating their chakra in such a way, the Konoha Kunoichi explained. That's cool, Ichigo complimented. How did you send that boy to the Soul Society? She asked again. It just happened. I just put medical chakra on my palm is all, the Kunoichi replied nonchalantly. Rukia held her chin in deep thought. She was going to revisit that later. You were pretty good at dodging, Ichigo said. Thanks. It's all because of my mentor. She taught me to dodge as I am medical ninja. We medical ninja have to survive in battle otherwise the whole team dies, she explained. So you're a medical ninja? Sounds cool, Ichigo said casually. Everything you say about Sakura is cool, Rukia said to the Shinigami as she rolled her eyes. Ichigo turned red as he looked away. Everyone burst into laughter except Sakura and Orihime. Sakura looked out the window as something caught her eye. What's that? She thought. She stood up and walked out of the cafeteria as they sat near the door. After 2 minutes, she came back rushing in. Guys, come outside. You've got to see this, she said, her body trembling with excitement. Is something wrong? Is it a hollow? Did someone scare you? But all that went deaf to Sakura's ears. She dragged Ichigo by the arm out of the cafeteria to the grounds. The others followed behind in suite. Look, she said as she pointed to the sky. There's a big metal bird flying in the sky, she almost shouted as she pointed to an airplane. 0.0.0.0.0.0 Everyone burst into laughter. It's an airplane, Sakura, Rukia said as she laughed uncontrollably, but Sakura didn't hear her. Isn't it awesome? She shrieked as she tugged onto Ichigo's sleeve like a little kid. This caused the others to laugh even harder. Ichigo stared at Sakura during this entire time. He hadn't said a single word. But one thing he knew, he had fallen in love with this ninja. The rest of the world drowned out to him as Sakura's gleeful laughter rang like bells in his head. The gang was at Ichigo's house. They were watching a horror movie on TV. They were watching a movie about clowns called It. Sakura didn't as much as flinch at the scary parts unlike the rest of them. She was a ninja, she had steel nerves. Ichigo's mind was occupied all this time. Sakura had been there for only a week yet he had fallen for her. Great, just great, he thought as he rolled his eyes inwardly. He had tried to ignore it but it just kept on coming back. Now I sound like a lovesick schoolboy, he thought as he deadpanned inwardly. Eek. Everyone turned their attention to Orihime who was pointing to the window with a trembling finger. A human figure was on the window with twigs sticking out. They could only see the silhouette. It's the clown. It's the clown, she shrieked. Everyone seemed to be frozen in fear. And they call themselves Shinigami, Sakura thought as she rolled her eyes. I've got this, Sakura said as she cracked her knuckles and walked over to the person. She dragged the person by the collar and punched him in the face. He fell down with a loud thud. He slowly stood up. Arg, Sakura-chan. Is that how you greet me after not seeing me for a week? The figure said. Tisk. It's just you. You didn't have to scare us like that, Naruto, Sakura said as she crossed her arms over her chest. Suddenly, realization hit her. Naruto. She exclaimed as her blonde teammate came clearly into view. He grinned in return. Naruto.
And she enveloped him in a bone-crushing hug. See can't breath. Sakura, see-chan, Naruto sputtered through enstrangled gasps.
Sorry, Sakura said as she released her blonde best friend. Naruto held his chest as he tried to regain oxygen. Sakura watched with soft eyes and a small smile as she finally felt complete now that her blonde was with her. Ichigo noticed this and thought, she's never looked at me that way. He cleared his throat then grinned at her. How are you, Sakura-chan, he asks. I'm feeling good now that you're here, she replied honestly. The shinobi blushed a cute shade of red that would put Hinata to shame as he scratched the back of his head. Don't take it the wrong way, Baka, she seethed as she smacked him on top of his head. Nay, Sakura-chan. What'd you do that for? The blonde complained as he massaged his throbbing head. Sakura only chuckled in return. Ichigo cleared his throat loudly. Ahem. We're still here, he muttered in a low yet audible voice. Oh. I forgot to introduce you, she said, and she dragged Naruto over to the four friends. Naruto. This is Ichigo, Rukia, Uryu, Orihime and Chad. They're my new friends and they've been taking care of me this entire time, she said as she pointed to each one of them respectively. Hey guys. I'm Naruto Uzumaki and I'm gonna become Hokage, Datbeo. He proclaimed loudly. Is this guy gonna really become Hokage? Ichigo whispered to a dazzled Rukia, remembering how Sakura defined a Hokage. Thanks for taking care of Sakura-chan while I was away, he said in all truth and honesty. Ichigo elbowed a still dazzled Rukia for her to answer since she was the self-proclaimed spokesperson of their group. I mean you're welcome, she replied coolly as she nervously cleared her throat. Ichigo eyed Rukia out of the corner of his eye. What's with her nervousness? He thought as he noticed her shift uncomfortably. Sakura noticed several bruises all over Naruto and his clothes were battered and bloodied. You're hurt, she exclaimed as she observed him. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I forgot to tell you that I fought some bad guy called Aizen. He was tough though, but I beat him anyway. Says he'll come back for revenge whatsoever, the blonde said as he shrugged nonchalantly. You fought with Aizen and defeated him? Rukia exclaimed, her mouth agape. He nodded quickly with an eye-closed smile. Sakura noticed that all of them had shocked expressions on their faces. Who's Aizen? She asks. He's the most badass Shinigami to ever have existed, Ichigo replied as he recovered from his initial shock. Naruto gave him a puzzled look. He means the Madara of this world, she explained in easier terms. Oh, the blonde said as he smiled sheepishly. How did you do it? Rukia asked rather gleefully. Before Naruto could answer, Sakura had already done so. He'll explain while I'll heal him, she said, her medic antics kicking in. Naruto was lying down on Ichigo's bed facing the ceiling while Sakura worked on his bruises. The whole gang had been astonished when her hands glowed green and began healing the obnoxious blonde. Ichigo had even muttered a small, wow, as he stared at Sakura work like an expert on Naruto's wounds.
So how did you defeat Aizen? Chad asked in a low but deep voice.
At first I was going easy on him but I saw he was a tough opponent. So I asked the Kyuubi for some help and I defeated him, he explained rather plainly as his pink-haired best friend worked on a gash across his torso. Naruto, that's not a real explanation, Sakura commented as she face-palmed inwardly. What am I supposed to say? He whined like a child. Give a more wide explanation like the justice you used or something like that, she said as she moved to his chest. She removed his jacket and began to heal the nasty cut stretching from his shoulder to his stomach. I don't know how to explain it, he said lazily. Now you're starting to sound like Shikamaru, she commented. Naruto only stuck his tongue out, which earned him a smack to the side of his head. I think it has something to do with the chakra thing, Rukia said as she held her chin in deep thought. Chakra? Sakura asks. Rukia nodded. I don't know if this theory is true. In this world we use spiritual energy to fight, but you guys use chakra, which a part of you, not some spiritual thingy whatsoever. So it might be that you're using chakra instead of spiritual energy does the trick, she explained. But I still think there's something more to it rather than chakra, Sakura commented.
What about having both spiritual energy and chakra?
Ichigo said after a short pause. Sakura was able to sense a hollow a fair distance away where she is, he said as he thought of the many times Sakura had sensed hollows which were far away and had defeated them with just one punch. You mean those black gigantic weirdo thingies? Naruto asks. You met hollows? Rukia asks. He nodded. Met them a couple of few times. Easy to defeat though. I used a Rasengan on them, he said. Since you were able to sense them, you might have both chakra and spiritual energy, Ichigo concluded. I'm guessing your theory about having both spiritual energy and chakra might be true, Sakura said. I'll see if the theory is true, Rukia concluded as she decided on further researching on the area. Sakura finished healing all of her best friend's wounds. She stood up and stretched a bit. Those wounds were quite nasty. Took a large chunk out of my chakra reserves, she said sleepily as she swayed a little. Ichigo caught before she fell down. He made her sit down on the floor and kneeled beside her. Are you okay? Naruto asked, concern clearly evident in his voice. I'm fine, she said as she waved a hand. She leaned into Ichigo's chest and was soon snoring. She looks really cute, doesn't she? Naruto said as he admired his pink-haired teammate. Ichigo nodded slowly. Ichigo shifted in order to make Sakura lie on the floor, but that immediately woke her up. She moved away from the comfort of his chest. "Sorry I fell asleep on you," she mumbled unapologetically as she sleepily rubbed her eyes. Think you need to rest," Ichigo said. "I will after he gets a bath," Sakura said as she pointed to Naruto, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed. What? Naruto stammered. "I could smell your stench even in my sleep," she commented dryly. "Sakura-chan, don't make bath at this time of the day," the blonde complained like a 3-year-old. "If you don't go and take a bath, I'm going to punch you all the way to next week," she threatened as she waved her fist in the air. Naruto tried to protest but grumpily made his way towards the bathroom after seeing that she was not changing her mind. "So he's your teammate," Orihime said after Naruto had left. "Yep, and best friend. Though he's quite a handful," she said as she gave the orange-haired girl a small smile. She massaged her temples as she frowned. Gosh, who knew that her chakra reserves had depleted this much? But it was understandable considering the many bruises and cuts that blonde had obtained. Maybe chakra exhaustion made the Kyuubi unable to quickly heal his wounds, considering he had been involved in a fight with the greatest villain in this world. "I better leave. It's getting pretty late," Uryu said as he stood up from his sitting position on the floor. "Me too," Chad said as he shifted from his position of leaning beside the closet. The others bid farewell to 2 of their friends and they left. "Sakura-chan. I don't have any clothes," Naruto shouted loudly from the bathroom.
Sakura's eyebrow twitched in annoyance. Ichigo heard her mutter, "Dobi," darkly before turning to him with a big smile and sweetly asking him if he had some clothes to spare.
He noticed that her smile was fake and strained. Probably trying to control her anger, he thought as he recalled how Rukia had done so on many occasions. He gave a weird look before walking over to his closet and pulling out a set of an orange t-shirt and black pants. He handed them over to Sakura, who in turn handed them over to Rukia and asked her to give Naruto the clothes as she yawned sleepily. Rukia agreed and left for the bathroom. Rukia was standing on the door of the bathroom. Her hands were slightly trembling. Her instincts were telling her that something big was going to happen once she opened that door. But she didn't know what it was. Her gut instinct never lied. She inhaled then exhaled. She braced herself for whatever was going to happen. She knocked once, but she got no answer. What's taking him so long? She thought impatiently. After knocking for the 5th time, she resolved to open the door herself and get inside. She turned the doorknob and entered the bathroom. Steam was everywhere, so she couldn't make out anything in the bathroom. She walked towards the shower and a figure of a person. "Naruto?" she called out. "Yes," he replied. "I came with your clothes," she said. "Thanks. Let me just come over there and get them," he replied, and she heard wet footsteps coming towards her direction. She walked over the direction where the footsteps were coming from but slipped on the wet floor and fell forward. But before she had a faceplant, she felt arms wrap around her. She blinked in confusion before turning to meet the tanned chest of a certain Uzumaki boy. She screamed and shoved the boy away from her as if he were death himself.
"Hey, are you okay?" Naruto asked concernedly. "Naruto, don't try to seduce Rukia in there," Sakura shouted from Ichigo's bedroom. Rukia nodded furiously as she thrust the clothes into his hands. She was out of the bathroom before Naruto could bat an eyelash.
Naruto arrived 5 minutes later clad in the clothes Ichigo had given him. He noticed that Rukia wasn't in the room. "Thanks for the clothes, Strawberry," Naruto said to the Shinigami. "I'm not Strawberry," he replied annoyedly as his eyebrow twitched. "But your name means strawberry, so it's the same thing," the blonde replied as he shrugged. Ichigo decided to let it pass for now. "So where am I going to sleep?" Naruto asked himself. "You can come over to my place. There is enough space for another person," Orihime spoke for the first time since Naruto had arrived. "Nah. I wouldn't want to trouble you," the Jinchuriki politely declined. "No, really. It's okay. Sakura is staying with me," she urged. "Is that okay, Sakura-chan?" Naruto asked the kunoichi, but he wasn't answered as Sakura was sprawled out on Ichigo's bed, snoring her head off. "Okay. I'll come with you. Thanks anyway," he said to the girl. "No problem," she replied with a smile. "Now to get Sakura-chan home quickly," he said. "Shadow clone jutsu," he said as he did the single hand sign, and another Naruto appeared. The original Naruto picked up Sakura bridal style. "You just tell me where you live and we'll get there really quick," Naruto said to a baffled Orihime. "Why yeah sure," she said as she recomposed herself. The clone Naruto picked her up bridal style. Goodbye strawberry. Say good night to Rukia for me. With that, the blonde shinobi and his clone jumped out of the open window towards Orihime's. So what do you think about Naruto? Ichigo teasingly asked Rukia, who had emerged from the closet she had hidden in after seeing Naruto shirtless in the bathroom. I just saw a real man, she said with stars in her eyes as she clasped both hands on her chest. Ichigo's sweat dropped anime style at her actions. Naruto was seated in class. He remembered how he had visited the head teacher's house last night after Orihime told him he had to get a place at their school. He used the talk no reverse jutsu and got a place. The head even helped him buy uniforms for free that very same night. Talk about a cool just you. They were in a chemistry lesson and it was so boring. He didn't know how much longer he could stay alive. The teacher was talking about the periodic table of elements. What the heck was that? All he knew were the nature elements and that was all. He looked over to Sakura to see her paying attention a lot. Considering she was a medical ninja, he guessed it would be more knowledge for her. He stared at the clock. They still had an hour before break. He groaned loudly in frustration, which earned him a glare from the teacher. They seated at the cafeteria. Rukia was explaining to Naruto, who was sitting across her, things he needed to know about their world. Orihime was seated beside Sakura explaining to her modern technology. She was explaining the GPS. Ichigo was beside Naruto poking his food while staring absent-mindedly at Sakura. Chad and Uryu were talking about chakra, which seemed to have interested them. So a GPS can track a person's location anywhere on the planet, Sakura concluded. Orihime nodded happily. Sakura had finally understood. Hey Naruto. How did you find me? Sakura asked, cutting his conversation short with Rukia. She did not notice the glare Rukia gave her, but this did not go unnoticed by Ichigo. I used Sage Mode to find the exact location of your chakra, then I came over, he explained with a shrug. I could have come earlier but that Aizen guy delayed me, he said as he pouted sourly. How long did you fight? Rukia asked curiously. The fact that Naruto had somehow managed to drive off Aizen was still a mystery to her. I'd say about a day and a half, the blonde replied as he calculated the times inwardly. Whoa, that's pretty long, the raven-haired Shinigami said in awe. Yeah. He was a tough opponent. His sword skills and taijutsu were awesome plus speed and strength. He had this weird crystal on his chest. Said something about second fusion, then he turned into this weird phantom figure, the still genin explained. Everyone's attention had drifted to their conversation. He was covered in this white coat which literally covered every bit of him. He healed quickly and his speed and strength had increased a lot as well as endurance and durability. Plus his spiritual energy had increased very much, the blonde said. Rukia nodded her head as she gathered all the information. Naruto had valuable information on Aizen which was very valuable to the Soul Society. Aizen had the Hogyoku which was his best weapon. Rukia would send them this information later. But he was no match for the great Naruto Uzumaki, Datbeo. He exclaimed loudly as he flashed his signature grin. I had to summon Kurama's chakra though, he added as he scratched his cheek embarrassedly. You did great Naruto. We might even help defeat Aizen, Sakura said softly. You'll help us defeat Aizen? Ichigo asked as he eyed the two warily. I guess it wouldn't hurt to help out a friend, the kunoichi replied with a shrug. That's right. We'll help you defeat that guy. Plus we still have unfinished business, he growled at the last part. But he's very strong. Will you be able to take him on? Orihime asked concernedly. Sakura and I can take on the whole world with my awesome jutsus and her medical ninjutsu plus monstrous strength, Datbeo. The last Uzumaki boy shouted. I'll inform the Soul Society on the information you told us and how you're willing to help us, Rukia concluded. They all nodded in agreement. Bored. Naruto exclaimed loudly as he flipped down onto Ichigo's sofa. It was so boring. He had been there for a few days. The first few days had been exciting, as he was being introduced to modern technology. But he felt so bored right now, he was getting tired. Naruto, you're making noise, Sakura said annoyedly as she sent him a glare. She was watching a romance soapy with Rukia and Orihime. Ichigo was playing cards with Chad and Uryu. Naruto was sprawled out on the sofa. He tried watching TV with the girls but it was too romantic for him. What to do? What to do? He thought as he drummed his fingers along the table, which annoyed Sakura. Naruto, she warned him darkly. He stood up and began to pace back and forth in front of the TV, completely oblivious to Sakura's threats. Naruto, Sakura said as her eyebrows twitched in annoyance. He was blocking her view. Rukia and Orihime had sensed Sakura's growing anger and decided not to intervene. The blonde shinobi held his chin in deep thought as he abruptly stopped exactly in front of the TV. I got it. The blonde exclaimed in realization as he smacked his fist onto his palm. Naruto, you idiot. Sakura shouted as she punched the blonde and sent him crashing into the wall. He left a large dent. My sisters are so gonna kill me, Ichigo thought as he looked at the painfully large dent Naruto had left. A fuming Sakura marched over to Naruto, her body trembling with anger. Naruto gulped and trembled in fear as he braced himself to meet the wrath of his female teammate. They were standing in an open clearing. It was a fair distance away from Karakura town. Naruto had suggested that they spar a bit to stretch their limbs after he had received a beating from Sakura. She hadn't even bothered to heal his injuries, saying the Kyuubi would have the duty of healing Adobe like him. The gang had stared at the two dumbstruck. Were they seriously teammates? They decided to look for a place which had lots of space and was far away from the town. Naruto had suggested that considering Sakura's signature moves. Naruto decided to spar with Rukia and Sakura with Ichigo since Orihime didn't deem herself powerful enough and Chad and Uryu just wanted to watch the two ninjas in action. Naruto and Sakura were dressed in their ninja clothes. Feels good to be back in these clothes, Naruto said as he smoothed out his black and orange jacket. Sakura nodded as she zipped up her boots. I almost forgot to give you, Sakura said as she handed Naruto his hitai. Thanks Sakura-chan, he said as he accepted the hitai. He tied it around his forehead, thoughts of Sasuke entering his mind. Sakura tied hers on top of her head. You guys ready? Rukia asked, seeing the two ninjas grinning. They both nodded. Okay then. Let's begin, Ichigo said as he flashed them the same grin. I'm not gonna go easy on you, Sakura shouted to Ichigo who was standing a good distance away from her. I won't hold back either, Ichigo replied as he smirked. Sakura smirked in return. She adjusted her black gloves and charged towards him. He met her midway and they became in a fight of hand-to-hand combat. Sakura's moves were swift and calculated but so were Ichigo's. She didn't use chakra to enhance her punches and kicks. Ichigo threw a punch but Sakura caught it and countered with her own. It connected with the Shinigami's face and Ichigo was sure he heard bones crack under that punch. This girl has amazing physical strength, he thought as he blocked another flying fist. Sakura dodged a kick but didn't see the other kick coming her way and it connected to her side and sent her flying a few meters away. Sakura! Orihime exclaimed from her seat on stone a fair distance away from the battlefield. Sakura slowly stood up as she recollected her bearings. Those are quite some powerful attacks, she said as she wiped away blood from her split lip. Ichigo grinned as a faint blush covered his cheeks. But it's not enough to defeat me cause I wasn't going full throttle yet, the kunoichi said as she smirked. Ichigo narrowed his eyes. She definitely had something under her sleeve. Shanaru! The girl shouted as she punched the ground with her chakra-enhanced fist.
The earth uprooted and quaked under her fist. A 500 meters dent was left apart from the dust and mass destruction she had done. Ichigo stared wide-eyed at the dent she had created. He had to jump away from the destruction, seeing that he would be enveloped as well. That's about a quarter of what I can do, she said as she savored his priceless expression. Ichigo regained himself as he recovered from the initial shock.
Now let's proceed, she said as she cracked her knuckles and charged towards him. I heard that you don't have all your powers, Naruto said as he stood apart from Rukia. I recovered them a while ago, she said. She was dressed in Shinigami clothes. Well then I guess I won't have to hold back, Naruto said as he drew out a kunai. She drew out her Zanpakuto. Naruto made a war cry as he charged towards her. Rukia didn't move but instead braced herself for his attack. They met and kunai and Zanpakuto clashed. They became involved in a battle of kenjutsu. Damn, she's better than me at weapons, Naruto thought as she slashed her Zanpakuto and he barely dodged but not without a small gash on the shoulder. He jumped away from her, seeing that he was most likely to lose. His kunais stood not a chance against her Zanpakuto. I have to admit that I'm inferior to you in terms of swordsmanship skills, Naruto commented. Rukia blushed and looked away in order to hide her face. Thanks, she said in a cool voice. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Naruto shouted as he went through the one-hand sign. Nearly 100 grinning Narutos poofed into existence. Let's see you fight this Rukia, the blonde said as he flashed his signature grin. How was he able to, she said inwardly as she looked at the 100 Narutos in awe. I have to defeat them quickly, she thought. The Narutos charged towards her. Rukia met them midway. Slashing her Zanpakuto everywhere, the clones disappeared in poofs. Using her speed, she cut through the clones easily. After cutting down about 50 clones, she resorted to hand-to-hand combat. It was difficult this time considering that he proved to be good at that. She jumped away from the clones which seemed to be increasing in number. Bakudo number 62. Hyopirankan, she shouted as she stretched out her palm. A blue-white rod formed in her hand and she threw it at the clones. It multiplied into 100 more rods. They hit each clones and they disappeared in loud poofs. Soon enough, only the original Naruto was left. He has dodged all the flying projectiles, though one of them had pinned him by the shoulder into a tree. He tried to remove the rod but it wouldn't budge. He saw Rukia slowly make her way towards. If I don't get free now, she'll finish off, he thought, panicking. His mind went through all the possible ways he could remove the rod but none seemed to work. Rukia was only a few meters away from him when he had an idea. Channeling chakra to his palm, he grabbed the rod and pulled it out. It worked, he exclaimed. He took the rod in his hand and spun it a few times. A good weapon, he said to himself. He looked to see Rukia staring at him with a curious expression. How did you pull it out? She asked casually, trying not to sound genuinely interested. Channeled chakra to my palm, he said nonchalantly. She hummed, thinking she would have to find the mystery behind chakra. Let us proceed then, Naruto said as he charged towards the Shinigami with the rod in his hand. Sakura had resorted to taijutsu seeing that he was better than her at weapons. Ichigo dodged her punches and kicks. She threw a fist at him and he sidestepped just in time to avoid it and hitting the tree behind him. The tree didn't break but it turned into splinters. Ichigo stared in horror at where his head had previously been. If she had managed to punch him, he now dodged Sakura's attacks very seriously. He knew if she hit him, he was a goner. Stand still, you annoying strawberry. Sakura shouted angrily as she threw punches and kicks which were not deflected but dodged. Guess Ichigo knew if he tried to block, he might as well lose that limb. If I stand still, you'll kill me, he said as he frantically dodged the increasing attacks. Time to wrap this up, Sakura said as she jumped away from the Shinigami. She went through 2 hand signs and muttered lowly, demonic illusion. Hell viewing technique. Ichigo found himself circled by spinning leaves. He looked around but didn't see Sakura. Where did these leaves come from? He thought. Ichigo. He turned around and saw his mother looking at him with a smile, arms outstretched. Mom? He stammered disbelievingly. Yes, Ichigo. It's me, she replied in her sweet voice. He stared at her hard. How come you're here? He asked as he gulped. She giggled happily. It's because I'm here to kill you, she said sweetly before her irises turned yellow and the sclera turned black.
She laughed maniacally as a hollow mask covered half her face. You're just like me. You're a demon and you're going to kill everyone you care about, she said darkly. You're a demon, she repeated like a mantra. No, I'm not a monster, he shouted as he clutched his head. It was painful to hear his mother say words like that. Monster Ichigo, she sang. He shook his head wildly in a desperate attempt to make it stop.
Then she was gone. He looked to see her nowhere in sight. What the, he started to say but a kunai to his throat stopped. It pressed against his throat such that it drew some blood. One move and you're dead, Sakura said darkly behind him. Crap, he thought. He thought of how he could escape. Don't even think about escaping. My left hand is pressed against your spinal cord. It's a chakra scalpel which can sever muscles inside without tearing the skin. I can just tear your spinal cord and you'll never be able to walk again, she said in a low deadly voice. Ichigo sighed in defeat. You win, he said. She moved away from him. That was a good match, wasn't it? She squealed gleefully, acting as though she hadn't been holding a kunai to his throat. Why yeah, he stammered, taken back by her sudden mood change. I think Rukia and Naruto are done as well, she said as she pointed to the two who were shaking hands. Sakura looked at Ichigo to see his face swollen. You're hurt, she said as she noticed a bruise on the left side of his face. Ichigo waved it off with a shrug. It's nothing serious, he said dismissively. He found Sakura, hands on either side of his face, glowing a soft green. The dull aching in his head seemed to fade away as her soft green chakra entered his system. His bruised jaw seemed to be healing too. She finished healing him, but her fingers lingered a moment too long on his face before moving to his collarbone. She healed the small cut across his neck she had put earlier on. She looked up to see Ichigo staring at her with a weird look in his eyes. It was dark and intense. Where had she seen that look? She put her glowing green hands back on either of his face to check for any brain damage since she had put him in a genjutsu. She pondered on that look. She had seen it on a Junin sensei, on Asuma's face. The exact same look he had when he looked at Kurenai. Her eyes widened slightly and her face turned red as she thought about her discovery. She looked up to meet his eyes and it was still there. She looked down again. She hadn't noticed that her face had turned a deeper shade of red and her hands weren't glowing anymore. Ichigo hummed lowly as he took every detail on Sakura's face. Damn, she's just too beautiful, he thought as he softly grabbed her chin and tilted her face so she looked up to him. Ichigo. She breathed in a husky voice which sent shivers down his spine.
He leaned down slowly. Oh my god, he's gonna kiss us.
Our first kiss. Shanaru. Inner Sakura cheered. Sakura seemed to be frozen. She didn't lean forward or attempt to move away. Just barely inches away from her lips such that their noses touched, a loud deliberate cough interrupted them and they literally jumped away from each other. Both their faces were tinted a pink that would put Sakura's pink hair to shame. A grinning Naruto stared at them as he carried Rukia bridal style in his arms. She was blushing but with a small smile on her face. The two had been involved in a weapons match. The rod proved to be useful but only lasted 5 minutes in battle before being cut in half. Naruto had complained loudly about her Zanpakuto. I think it's time we finish this, Rukia said. Their ongoing battle had to come to a stop. I'll finish it with my signature Kido spell, she thought with a smirk. Hado number 33. Sokatsui, she shouted with her palm outstretched. Blue energy formed in a large circle on her palm before blasting towards Naruto. The blast hit the blonde by surprise and sent him flying into a boulder. Rukia eyed the shinobi, concern evident on her features. Is he dead? She asked herself as she looked at Naruto, who was covered in black soot. Then he poofed and was replaced by a log. Over here. Rukia looked up to see Naruto flying towards her with a Rasengan. He was already too close to her that she couldn't move away. He aimed the Rasengan straight for her stomach. Her eyes widened as Naruto reached her, with his Rasengan spinning in the hand. She closed her eyes as she braced herself for the impact. He pinned her to the tree beside her. She waited for the pain but it never came. She opened her eyes to see Naruto's face barely inches away from hers.
She looked down to see a large dent on the tree bark, just a mere inch away from her stomach.
She looked back up to meet his sea blue eyes. I wouldn't want to hurt a pretty face like you, he said as he moved away from her. Rukia took a moment to recollect herself. He had the chance to defeat her but he didn't. She saw his outstretched hand in front of her. Thanks for the match, he said in genuine honesty, his eyes shining. Sure thing, she replied as she silently prayed that her face did not display her emotions cause she was embarrassed like crazy. She started to walk but felt a sharp pain to her left side. She looked to see a small graze on her left side. Oh. You're hurt. Naruto exclaimed concernedly. I guess my Rasengan grazed you, he said as worry lines creased his forehead. It's okay, Sakura said as she waved her hand dismissively. He shook his head no, he picked her up bridal style which startled the raven-haired Shinigami. What are you doing? She asked, startled. If you move a lot, you might get worse. I'll carry you to Sakura so that she can heal, he said. I can walk by myself, she protested but his determined glare shut her up. Can you heal Rukia for me? Naruto asked as he gently laid Rukia on the ground. Sakura made her way towards the Shinigami and made her lie on her back. She inspected the wound, casting Naruto a sideways glance before starting to heal it. How did you get the wound? Sakura asked. My Rasengan sort of grazed her, he replied as he scratched his cheek nervously. You guys were awesome. Orihime exclaimed happily as she joined them. They all sent her a, you're welcome, smile. Chad and Uryu joined them and the compliments rained down on them. Loud crashes and bangs filled the entire house. Orihime, Chad and Uryu had gone home. Sakura and Naruto had stayed behind at Ichigo's. They were in Ichigo's room. Rukia and Ichigo were playing a game of Monopoly when they heard shouts and loud noises coming from Ichigo's room. You can't say that. Yes, I can. You started it first. The two shared a knowing look before rushing to the Shinigami's bedroom. They opened the door to find everything in the room out of place. The sofa and bed were overturned. Books were scattered all over and the window was broken. The laptop was missing from its usual spot and the closet had a large hole in it. Naruto had a Rasengan spinning in his hand and Sakura's fist was covered in blue whizzing chakra, both of them glaring at each other and killing intent heavy in the room. Guys? Is everything okay? The raven-haired asked concernedly. The two ninjas were still clad in their ninja outfits. She had never seen the two ninja fight, except when Naruto did something stupid and Sakura would bonk him on his head. Apart from that, she saw genuine friendship between the two. This wasn't jest. It was really serious. Naruto had a Rasengan in his hand and Sakura's hand was covered in a deadly layer of blue. No one really answered her. Guys, are you okay? Ichigo tried to speak but was cut short by Naruto. Oh, just shut up, you strawberry, the blonde ninja shouted. Ichigo's mouth snapped shut. Sakura's face turned with anger, which was noticed by Rukia. Naruto, she warned dangerously. What are going to do about it? Headbutt me with your ugly forehead. He taunted. That was a low blow and Naruto knew it. The kunoichi seemed to steam with anger. Naruto, Rukia started, sensing approaching danger but Sakura beat her to it. Oh, for the love of God, just butt out of our lives. She practically and the room was filled with a sudden killing intent. Rukia, sensing that there was no going about, turned to Ichigo. Let's go. You wouldn't want to have your head on their ninja platters, she said as she dragged him out by the hand. Ichigo didn't refuse and allowed himself to be dragged away. The two ninjas waited for the Shinigamis to leave before continuing their conversation. And what was that for? Sakura almost yelled at the ninja. What? He asked, feigning obliviousness. Cutting off Ichi-kun like that. She snapped. Oh, so now he's Ichi-kun. Naruto replied, mimicking Sakura's tone. Sakura turned red in embarrassment. Oh see. You're even blushing. He pointed out with a snarl. That doesn't count. The girl defended herself but it went to deaf ears. Who's Sasuke gonna marry when he comes? Tell me, who in the world except you? He growled. PSH. I'm not gonna get married to him, she snapped. Yes you are. The Jinchurili shrieked. You can't dictate my life. I'm not some orange fox living inside of you who you tell what to do. The pinkette spat coldly. Naruto fought the urge to fling his Rasengan at her but he couldn't because he knew that even though they were fighting and had said some harsh words to each other, they still held each other dear. The Kyuubi part was a bit rough but he had also insulted her forehead which was also touchy-feely topic so it was fair. You're busy talking about me but what about you? Busy groping poor Rukia, she taunted. I so do not grope her, he defended himself. Sakura rolled her eyes. Naruto. I'm a medic for crying out loud. Rukia's injury wasn't serious, even a toddler would know that. But no, you chose to carry her. Not to mention she was enjoying it, she scoffed. She was enjoying it? He asked hopefully, his eyes shining with his cheeks dusted red. That's not the point, she exclaimed as she stomped her foot, creating a small crater. Oops, she thought. I caught you two almost kissing, the blonde said. You were groping her, Sakura stated as a matter of fact. Naruto deactivated his Rasengan and walked over to her. Sakura, he said as he placed his hands on her shoulders. You can't fall in love with Ichigo, you know that, he said in that mature voice she loved. She looked down at the floor. We are not here to stay permanently, we have to leave. What if you fall in love then we have to leave and then you get your heart broken all over again? He reasoned with her. She stayed quiet.
Do you want him to leave you? Or better yet, do you want to leave him?
He asked quietly. I would stay, she said so softly that it was barely above a whisper but she knew she was lying to herself.
You would leave everything for him. Tsunade Bachan, Kakashi-sensei, Sai, Ino, Saizun and even Sasuke. He said. Sakura debated with herself and saw that there was no going about it. I'd be damned if I let you stay here. What would I tell Granny? That I left her so that she could live a life with a Shinigami. Heck, what would I tell Sasuke? He would have my head on a silver platter. He laughed at the last part. Okay. I hear you. I won't fall in love with Ichigo,
she said as she looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Naruto pulled her in for a bear hug. She wrapped her arms around as she cried. What about Rukia? She asks, her face buried in his chest. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't want either of our hearts to be broken by my own selfishness, he said, his head resting on top of her head. She pulled and wiped away her tears. You okay? He asked concernedly. Yeah, she nodded. Now for your punishment for insulting my forehead, she said devilishly as she cracked her knuckles. Sakura-chan, he said as he slowly backed away. Rukia and Ichigo heard Naruto's pained screams from Ichigo's room. I see they solved their problem, she said as she flipped over a magazine. Ichigo nodded as switched to a different channel. The 5 friends plus the 2 ninja were sitting in Orihime's lounge. They had come together to discuss plans on defeating Aizen. The Konoha Nin had read through a file on everything they needed to know about him, as far as the Soul Society knew. He seems pretty tough, Sakura commented as she closed the file. Yeah, it seems as though the fusion's more, he becomes stronger, Naruto said. So what do we have to do to defeat him? Rukia asks. Sakura noticed that everyone was looking at her, even Naruto. Why are you all looking at me? She asks. Sakura, don't be so dense. We all know that you've got the most brains among all of us, Ichigo said. Even more than Rukia, he added, which earned him a glare from Rukia and a blush from Sakura. Sakura pondered on the issue at hand. She had never been given such an opportunity before, creating a plan to save the world. That was always Kakashi and Naruto's thing, not hers. She looked at their expectant faces. It seemed as though their entire hope was on her shoulders. I won't let them down, she thought determinedly. Okay, the plan is like this, she began explaining. Sakura finished finalizing her master plan with the help of Rukia's and surprisingly Naruto's analytical skills, Uryu's brains, Orihime's sadistic methods and the information provided by Ichigo about what they knew about the Shinigami so far. It took her a few moments or so to complete it, but thank God they had finished. What's left is the action, she thought warily. She had discovered several loopholes in their plan which were overlooked, but she kept quiet for the better of it. She just hoped that her backup plan would be enough to help them defeat the bad guys. Guys, since we're putting out plan into action tomorrow, I thought that maybe we should at least have some fun, Ichigo suggested. Everyone turned to look at him. They were sitting in the cafeteria eating their lunch. It had been almost a week since they decided that they would fight Aizen. It was Friday and they would fight him tomorrow, since Saturday was a free day. We need to have some fun before we die tomorrow, he said with a cheeky grin. Way to spread the optimism, Rukia muttered lowly but loud enough for everyone to hear.
I think it might be a good idea, Sakura said after a pause. The male Shinigami smiled. You can go on without me, the raven-haired girl said as she waved her hand lazily. Don't be such a sour bum. We gotta go together. It'll be fun, the boy reasoned. Rukia looked around to see everyone looking at her expectantly. Why are you all looking at me like that? She asked as she shifted uncomfortably under their gaze.
Come on Rukia. It'll be fun. For memory's sake, Datbeo. The blonde all but shouted. Rukia still wouldn't budge, but after being given the famous Uzumaki puppy eyes, she knew she had lost this one. Fine, she muttered as she looked away from the blonde's adorable face, her face tinged pink. Everyone cheered. They were attending a musical concert in which Kana Boone was performing the song Silhouette. Chad was dressed in a black muscle shirt, white jeans and white Air Jordan sneakers. For once, Uryu wasn't wearing a shirt but instead was clad in a white polo shirt with black jeans and white Converse. Rukia and Orihime were dressed in black skirts which ended just above the knees. However, Rukia had a maroon t-shirt with a gray hoodie on top and Orihime had a purple t-shirt and a leather jacket on top. Ichigo was dressed in black casual jeans, a green t-shirt and a black hoodie on top. The loudmouth blonde was dresses in a screaming orange t-shirt with Ram in the front, black jeans and an orange hoodie plus white sneakers. Talk about a screaming orange freak. Ichigo had commented under his breath, which earned a glare from the blonde and a bonk from Rukia. Sakura was wearing loose black shorts, a red t-shirt and a white crop hoodie on top. All the girls were wearing sandals. Ichigo had boasted proudly about Kana Boone, saying they were the best band in the city. Neither of the Karakura citizens had denied, and so the two ninjas chose to believe him. It's about to start, Ichigo whispered into Sakura's ears as the crowd began to quiet down. The guitar and drums started playing and the people went into a frenzy. Is no se de fumikomu gorain bakura wa nanimo mada shiranu. Isan koit furikuruto mo nai bakura wa nanimo mada shiranu. Udateku kirameku ace ga koboru no sa. Obotanai koto mo takusan adadoru daremo care mo shiruedo. Daiji ni shiteta mano wasareta furi o shitanda yo. Nanimo nani yo warusa. Everyone was shouting at the top of their lungs as the band performed. Naruto was the loudest, as usual. The band continued to play on. Is no de omoidasu shonen bakura wa nanimo kamo o hoshiga tta. Wakadatiru tte akidzuitiru tte toke no hari wa hibi ka tomaranai.
Ubataku nagareru toki takioku. Tuku ni nat.
Obotanai koto mo takusan adadoru daremo care mo shiruedo. O sor de imaru koto shiranai furi o shitanda yo. Nanimo nani yo warusa harari to mataru. Konoha no yu ni yureru koto naku. As the band played with instruments only, Sakura was jumping up and down. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. If Konoha had this type of music, I'd go there every single day of my life, she thought as she screamed wildly. Shuso nakusu sugashidata yo obotanai koto mo takusan at akido. Kido zuto kawaranai mono ga aru koto o shiate kareta anada wa. Kiru shirueto daiji ni shite monomat otana ni naru nda. Donana toki mo hanasazu ni mamori sudzuku yu soshitara itsu no hai ni ka. Nanimo kamo awareru sa harari to mataru. Konoha ga tond yuku. Everyone clapped hands as they finished the song. Thank you. Thank you. The members of Kanabun said as they left the stage. That was one of the best songs ever, Naruto exclaimed as they sat around a table. They were at an after-party. They were drinking spiked drinks and the alcohol was starting to get at Naruto's head. I hope he won't have a hangover, otherwise tomorrow's battle won't work, the kunoichi thought as she studied her blonde best friend warily. I hear you clearly, Naruto, can you turn the volume down? Rukia said as she plugged her ears. The blonde was seating beside her and was literally screaming in her ear. What'd you say, Rukia? He all but shouted again. Rukia groaned loudly. Guys, I think Naruto should go home. If he gets a hangover, the kunoichi trailed. I'll head first with him, Rukia quickly volunteered. I need to get out of this hellhole, she thought desperately. Okay, you can go ahead. Just make sure you don't drop him, Sakura commented as she saw the female Shinigami sling the shinobi over her shoulder. I'm not making any promises, the girl replied as she walked away. After a few drinks and a nice chat, Orihime stood up to go home. I should accompany you, Uryu said as he stood up as well. No, it's okay. I can manage, the redhead said as she waved her hands dismissively. But Uryu persisted. He should accompany you, Orihime. It's not safe to walk alone at night, especially when you're a girl, Sakura piped in. She had noticed Uryu's obvious infatuation to the girl and was helping him make a move. But she was cut off with a stern glare from Sakura. You're only saying that so you have Ichigo all to yourself, the girl muttered lowly with a tinge of contempt. The noise made it hard to hear, but Sakura was the only to hear due to her sharp ninja senses. Her eyes widened a fraction. Then it hit her. Orihime was obviously attracted to Ichigo and she saw Sakura as competition. She had seen the signs and chose to ignore them. Oh gosh, she thought warily. After Uryu, Orihime and Chad left, there was only Sakura and Ichigo. An uncomfortable silence dawned upon them and neither of them knew what to say. After what seemed like an eternity, Ichigo decided to break the silence. I think we should leave, he said awkwardly. Yeah, the girl replied none too quickly. After they left, they roamed the streets of Karakura town. They were walking in comfortable silence. The sakura trees were in full bloom and the streetlights were glowing, giving the street a heavenly feeling. These are so beautiful, Sakura commented as she walked down the street. Ichigo nodded in return. Just like you, he said softly with a smile. Sakura stopped in the middle of the street to look at him, but he continued walking. Sakura felt like a fool for standing there gaping at him like a fish out of water. After regaining her composure, she hurriedly trotted after him. They reached a bridge and they stood there, looking at the sky. For some odd reason, the stars were really shining. Or is it because I'm beside Sakura that I'm now acting like a lovesick schoolboy? The Shinigami thought to himself. So have you ever had a love interest? He found himself asking and he mentally slapped himself. He looked to the side to find her staring at the moon. Yeah, she replied softly. Can I know about him? He asked in a meek voice. She didn't answer. Deciding to let it pass, he was surprised when she spoke up. I met him when I was 5. I had just entered the academy, she started. He was the most handsome and coolest kid of our group. Almost every girl had a crush on him, me included, she said as she chuckled. Ichigo ignored the jealousy burning in his chest. We were put in the same team when we were made genin. I was delighted. Of course, Naruto was my other teammate and it nagged me, but I endured, she continued. She sighed. Did something bad happen? He said as he noticed her sudden sullen mood. Yeah. He left 3 years ago on a quest of power. I tried to talk him out of it, but he knocked me out and left me on a bench, she replied sadly. He couldn't help but feel pity towards the girl and towards the bastard who left her. What about now? Do you still like him? He asks. Sakura was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. Not anymore. There's someone else, she said as she smiled coyly. What's he like? He asks. He hoped that maybe it could be him. It was only hope, he didn't know whether she felt the same way. Well, she said as she placed a finger on her chin. This is going to be fun. Playing with his mind, Shinobi. Inner exclaimed as she punched the air victoriously. He's sweet and cute, she said as Ichigo silently compared himself to what she was saying. He's loud, a bit bossy, likes to smile a lot, talks about, is an idiot at times, she said as she counted off her fingers. That's a bit like me, he thought as he smiled like a little kid. She likes me, he celebrated inwardly. But, she said as she cut his thought process. He's also very, very dense, she finished proudly. Dense? He repeated. She nodded like an eager kid. But he wasn't dense. Naturo was the dense, his eyes widened. It's that blonde idiot, he seethed. Sakura looked at him quizzically. Nothing. I said nothing, he said quickly. But inwardly he was thinking of the multiple ways he would slaughter that blonde. Sakura, seeing his furious expression, burst into laughter which infuriated him more. The two arrived to find Ichigo's house battered. It was barely recognizable. They could only stare in shock as they stared at the ruins. What happened? He yelled to no one in particular. Ichigo. A meek voice said. They turned around to find Orihime walking over to them, her clothes battered and bloodied. She staggered towards them. Orihime. They both exclaimed. Sakura rushed towards, her hands glowing green with healing chakra. She made the girl lie down and started to heal her wounds. They didn't seem to be very serious, but they needed to be treated immediately. What happened? He asked concernedly. Aizen, A attack. Too early, P plan, Naruto and Rukia, F fight. She tried to speak but couldn't form the words. Sakura hushed her. Both of them were angry to have been in lover's paradise while their friends were fighting. We need to go over there now, Ichigo said as he eyed the kunoichi. She nodded her head. After making sure that she had dealt with the more serious injuries, she stood up to leave. Ichigo turned to go but was stopped by Orihime's hand on his wrist. He looked back at her. Please don't die, she croaked painfully, her eyes pleading him before falling down unconscious. Sakura looked at the girl sympathetically. She knew how strong her feelings were towards the Shinigami and how ashamed she felt at being so vulnerable. She created a clone which picked up the unconscious girl and shunshined towards the nearby hospital. Let's go, she said in a stern tone. He nodded. Sakura was temporarily out of the fight. After receiving a Kido spell which almost left hole on her chest, she had retreated to the ground, intent on watching Ichigo and Aizen fight in the sky, whilst she thought of a plan to lure Aizen into a trap. He seemed to be growing more powerful each time. He had already undergone the third fusion, his hair now longer and eyes with purple sclera. He had improved immensely in speed and agility, even healing naturally. Sakura knew that she was nowhere near his speed and only Ichigo seemed to be able to keep up with him as he had used what he called Bankai. But even that wasn't enough as he quickly reverted back to his original form after a few minutes fighting with Aizen. It had to do with the Hogyoku, she had thought. Naruto had joined the fight recently after temporarily dismantling Katsuro. He was also struggling to keep up with Aizen. The two bright-haired boys fought side by side, giving their all into defeating Aizen. The pink-haired kunoichi eyed the male Shinigami warily. Even though Aizen seemed to be fine, Sakura knew that he wasn't any better than Naruto and Ichigo. The only thing that kept him going was the Hogyoku. She eyed his wounds with a medic's eye. He seemed to be tiring and was becoming more reckless. She had a theory to confirm and hoped that Naruto and Ichigo would buy her enough time. He activated Sage Mode, growing more furious by the moment. He couldn't a meaningful hit on him. He only managed to land a few blows. He had to end this quickly. Forming a massive Rasengan which he was sure Pervy Sage would have been proud of, he jumped into the air towards Ichigo and Aizen who were fighting. Strawberry can barely keep up with him, the blonde Jinchuriki thought. Ichigo sensed Naruto coming behind and commenced to create a quick distraction that would distract Aizen, if only for a few seconds. He swung Zangetsu towards the brunette's neck and Aizen countered by crouching low enough to avoid the Zanpakuto. He immediately stood up and swung Kyoka Suigetsu in a vertical direction. Ichigo caught the Zanpakuto with his hands, closing his bleeding palms tightly around it. What is he trying to do? Aizen thought as he struggled with the orange-haired Shinigami who seemed intent on holding his Zanpakuto. Let go you imbecile, he sneered as he pulled his Zanpakuto from the Kurosaki. And no, he gasped, obviously being hurt by the Zanpakuto but deciding to hold on nonetheless. At that moment, Aizen's Shinigami senses picked up a movement behind him and he turned a second too late to see Naruto flying towards him. The Rasengan hit him squarely in the chest and sent him barreling into the ground, creating a large crater where he had crashed. Naruto staggered onto his knees, physical and chakra exhaustion already weakening him all the more. Ichigo was beside him, his whole body propped up by his Zanpakuto. Are you okay? He asked the Shinigami. He nodded in return. The two watched Aizen struggle to stand up, his chest blackened due to the force of the Rasengan, the Hogyoku glistening slightly. You think a weakling like you can defeat me? He said, his teeth tainted red with blood. He refused to admit that the Rasengan had hurt him more than he had expected. They could not defeat him. They could never defeat him. He was Aizen. A weakling who couldn't even bring his friend back? He taunted, opting to manipulate the blonde. The first fight had been a nasty one. He had severely underestimated him, leaving him bedridden for 2 days.
He had heard reports saying that there was a kid who went around killing hollows in a single blow.
After some digging and a brief investigation by Katsuro, he had come to know the blonde as Naruto Uzumaki whom Katsuro had teleported here by accident. He was a Jinchuriki, Katsuro had told him. He harbored a demon called the Nine-Tailed Fox and decided to test that Jinchuriki. He had gotten more than he bargained and swore to defeat him the next time he saw him. A mere 16-year-old like Kurosaki could not defeat him, could never defeat him. He saw Naruto stiffen immediately and knew he had found his mark. Katsuro had told him about the blonde's undying love for his fellow Uchiha teammate. You cannot even bring Sasuke back, so how can you defeat me? He asked with a sickeningly innocent face. The atmosphere immediately began to tense. Is this the power Katsuro had been talking about? He asked himself. The famous Uchiha Sasuke who left his village in search of power. You vowed to that girl to bring him back, didn't you? Yet you have not yet brought him back, he continued. Ah, but what can I say? How could you ever bring back someone you love when an actual fact is that you have a demon inside you? He said with a wicked smile. Oh wait, you don't have a demon. You actually are the demon, he said and laughed maniacally. The one thing he enjoyed the most was to show people how much of a demon they were. Each and every one of them had that demonic, evil side that they didn't want to embrace. He would help them to do that. Aren't I right, Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed beast which killed your parents and many other citizens of Konoha? He added. And that had been the final straw. Raw power burst in the whole area around him. He saw Naruto on all fours being cloaked in red, what he thought was the beast's power. Yes, that's it. He thought as he smirked. Show me your true colors, demon. Your true powers, he said sadistically. Don't talk like you know anything about me, the blonde growled in a very inhumanly voice. Before Aizen could bat an eyelash, the blonde was already in front of him. He only got a millisecond to study his blackened whiskers, red demonic eyes and long fangs before he was being face-punched skyward halfway into the sky. But before he went more than a few kilometers, he received a swiping kick which knocked the air out of him and sent him plummeting into the ground. The force of the crash created a shockwave such that the earth rumbled in return. The pain came at him full force that he felt his eyes water before he forcefully pushed the tears back. He could not be seen crying. Every muscle of his screamed and burned in pain.
He had never felt this much pain before, such that he was surprised to still be alive.
He remained motionless for a few moments, unable to move a single muscle before the Hogyoku's power suddenly filled him and eased the pain somehow by a pitiful fraction. He staggered up to see his attire completely obliterated with only his lower half still covered. He saw the blonde struggling in what seemed to be an internal battle, the demonic features flickering on and off on his battered face. The pink-haired girl was beside him in an instant, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. She said a few words which he could not make out and was sure didn't care whether he heard them or not. He secretly hoped that what she said would calm the angry shinobi.
He had suddenly had the feeling that he did not want to taste that power. She looked at the blonde in a hard yet determined expression, her eyes ablaze with fire. And the next moment, he knew whom his next target was. He had to end this battle quickly. He looked at his Hogyoku and thought he saw a crack before dismissing the thought almost immediately. He eyed his next and searched around for his Zanpakuto whilst the two ninjas talked to themselves.
Naruto, are you okay? Sakura asks, her face soft with concern. I'm okay. Don't worry Sakura-chan, he said in a reassuring tone. Please don't scare me like that, she said in a soft voice. His heart broke at the sight. He knew her deep care for him and how she never wanted him to get hurt because of the Kyuubi. I won't, he replied, his face saying all words could never express. Leave the rest to me. I know how to defeat him, she said in a hard tone. Let me help you, he said. You've already done your part. Now it's my turn, she said. But Sakura, trust me on this one, she said, and that was all he needed to shut up. He knew that she never wanted him to doubt her power and he wasn't going to start now. Don't you think it's time to wrap this up? Aizen said as he stared hard at Sakura who was standing a few meters away from him. I think it is, the kunoichi replied in a flat tone. I'm going to have to jump to the final fusion if I want to end this quickly, the brunette thought. Final fusion, he muttered, and immediately his body transformed. His forehead now hosted a third black vertical eye. The skin on his face had split open and pulled back around the sides of his head to reveal a blackened demon-like skull. He had 3 vertical holes running down his chest, the Hogyoku at the center of the top hole. His feet had become single claws and his hands blackened. He had a set of 6 sheet-like butterfly wings with eyes upon the center, adorned with hollow-like skulls and trailing into tendrils. His musculature had become more defined and his powerful ryotsu charge up the air around them. Sakura was the least bit phased. Sakura was temporarily out of the fight. After receiving a Kido spell which almost left hole on her chest, she had retreated to the ground, intent on watching Ichigo and Aizen fight in the sky, whilst she thought of a plan to lure Aizen into a trap. He seemed to be growing more powerful each time. He had already undergone the third fusion, his hair now longer and eyes with purple sclera. He had improved immensely in speed and agility, even healing naturally. Sakura knew that she was nowhere near his speed and only Ichigo seemed to be able to keep up with him as he had used what he called Bankai. But even that wasn't enough as he quickly reverted back to his original form after a few minutes fighting with Aizen. It had to do with the Hogyoku, she had thought. Naruto had joined the fight recently after temporarily dismantling Katsuro. He was also struggling to keep up with Aizen. The two bright-haired boys fought side by side, giving their all into defeating Aizen. The pink-haired kunoichi eyed the male Shinigami warily. Even though Aizen seemed to be fine, Sakura knew that he wasn't any better than Naruto and Ichigo. The only thing that kept him going was the Hogyoku. She eyed his wounds with a medic's eye. He seemed to be tiring and was becoming more reckless. She had a theory to confirm and hoped that Naruto and Ichigo would buy her enough time. He activated Sage Mode, growing more furious by the moment. He couldn't a meaningful hit on him. He only managed to land a few blows. He had to end this quickly. Forming a massive Rasengan which he was sure Pervy Sage would have been proud of, he jumped into the air towards Ichigo and Aizen who were fighting. Strawberry can barely keep up with him, the blonde Jinchuriki thought. Ichigo sensed Naruto coming behind and commenced to create a quick distraction that would distract Aizen, if only for a few seconds. He swung Zangetsu towards the brunette's neck and Aizen countered by crouching low enough to avoid the Zanpakuto. He immediately stood up and swung Kyoka Suigetsu in a vertical direction. Ichigo caught the Zanpakuto with his hands, closing his bleeding palms tightly around it. What is he trying to do? Aizen thought as he struggled with the orange-haired Shinigami who seemed intent on holding his Zanpakuto. Let go you imbecile, he sneered as he pulled his Zanpakuto from the Kurosaki. And no, he gasped, obviously being hurt by the Zanpakuto but deciding to hold on nonetheless. At that moment, Aizen's Shinigami senses picked up a movement behind him and he turned a second too late to see Naruto flying towards him. The Rasengan hit him squarely in the chest and sent him barreling into the ground, creating a large crater where he had crashed. Naruto staggered onto his knees, physical and chakra exhaustion already weakening him all the more. Ichigo was beside him, his whole body propped up by his Zanpakuto. "Are you okay?" he asked the Shinigami. He nodded in return. The two watched Aizen struggle to stand up, his chest blackened due to the force of the Rasengan, the Hogyoku glistening slightly. "You think a weakling like you can defeat me?" he said, his teeth tainted red with blood. He refused to admit that the Rasengan had hurt him more than he had expected. They could not defeat him. They could never defeat him. He was Aizen. A weakling who couldn't even bring his friend back? He taunted, opting to manipulate the blonde. The first fight had been a nasty one. He had severely underestimated him, leaving him bedridden for 2 days. He had heard reports saying that there was a kid who went around killing hollows in a single blow. After some digging and a brief investigation by Katsuro, he had come to know the blonde as Naruto Uzumaki, whom Katsuro had teleported here by accident. He was a Jinchuriki, Katsuro had told him. He harbored a demon called the Nine-Tailed Fox and decided to test that Jinchuriki. He had gotten more than he bargained and swore to defeat him the next time he saw him. A mere 16-year-old like Kurosaki could not defeat him, could never defeat him. He saw Naruto stiffen immediately and knew he had found his mark. Katsuro had told him about the blonde's undying love for his fellow Uchiha teammate. "You cannot even bring Sasuke back, so how can you defeat me?" he asked with a sickeningly innocent face. The atmosphere immediately began to tense. Is this the power Katsuro had been talking about? He asked himself. The famous Uchiha Sasuke who left his village in search of power. You vowed to that girl to bring him back, didn't you? Yet you have not yet brought him back, he continued. Ah, but what can I say? How could you ever bring back someone you love when an actual fact is that you have a demon inside you? He said with a wicked smile. Oh wait, you don't have a demon. You actually are the demon, he said and laughed maniacally. The one thing he enjoyed the most was to show people how much of a demon they were. Each and every one of them had that demonic, evil side that they didn't want to embrace. He would help them to do that. Aren't I right, Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed beast which killed your parents and many other citizens of Konoha? He added. And that had been the final straw. Raw power burst in the whole area around him. He saw Naruto on all fours being cloaked in red, what he thought was the beast's power. Yes, that's it, he thought as he smirked. Show me your true colors, demon. Your true powers, he said sadistically. Don't talk like you know anything about me, the blonde growled in a very inhumanly voice. Before Aizen could bat an eyelash, the blonde was already in front of him. He only got a millisecond to study his blackened whiskers, red demonic eyes and long fangs before he was being face-punched skyward halfway into the sky. But before he went more than a few kilometers, he received a swiping kick which knocked the air out of him and sent him plummeting into the ground. The force of the crash created a shockwave such that the earth rumbled in return. The pain came at him full force that he felt his eyes water before he forcefully pushed the tears back. He could not be seen crying. Every muscle of his screamed and burned in pain. He had never felt this much pain before, such that he was surprised to still be alive. He remained motionless for a few moments, unable to move a single muscle before the Hogyoku's power suddenly filled him and eased the pain somehow by a pitiful fraction. He staggered up to see his attire completely obliterated with only his lower half still covered. He saw the blonde struggling in what seemed to be an internal battle, the demonic features flickering on and off on his battered face. The pink-haired girl was beside him in an instant, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. She said a few words which he could not make out and was sure didn't care whether he heard them or not. He secretly hoped that what she said would calm the angry shinobi. He had suddenly had the feeling that he did not want to taste that power. She looked at the blonde in a hard yet determined expression, her eyes ablaze with fire. And the next moment, he knew whom his next target was. He had to end this battle quickly. He looked at his Hogyoku and thought he saw a crack before dismissing the thought almost immediately. He eyed his next and searched around for his Zanpakuto whilst the two ninjas talked to themselves. Naruto, are you okay? Sakura asks, her face soft with concern. I'm okay. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, he said in a reassuring tone. Please don't scare me like that, she said in a soft voice. His heart broke at the sight. He knew her deep care for him and how she never wanted him to get hurt because of the Kyuubi. I won't, he replied, his face saying all words could never express. Leave the rest to me. I know how to defeat him, she said in a hard tone. Let me help you, he said. You've already done your part. Now it's my turn, she said. But Sakura, trust me on this one, she said, and that was all he needed to shut up. He knew that she never wanted him to doubt her power and he wasn't going to start now. Don't you think it's time to wrap this up? Aizen said as he stared hard at Sakura, who was standing a few meters away from him. I think it is, the kunoichi replied in a flat tone. I'm going to have to jump to the final fusion if I want to end this quickly, the brunette thought. Final fusion, he muttered, and immediately his body transformed. His forehead now hosted a third black vertical eye. The skin on his face had split open and pulled back around the sides of his head to reveal a blackened demon-like skull. He had 3 vertical holes running down his chest, the Hogyoku at the center of the top hole. His feet had become single claws and his hands blackened. He had a set of 6 sheet-like butterfly wings with eyes upon the center, adorned with hollow-like skulls and trailing into tendrils. His musculature had become more defined and his powerful ryotsu charge up the air around them. Sakura was the least bit phased. Sakura was temporarily out of the fight. After receiving a Kido spell which almost left hole on her chest, she had retreated to the ground, intent on watching Ichigo and Aizen fight in the sky, whilst she thought of a plan to lure Aizen into a trap. He seemed to be growing more powerful each time. He had already undergone the 3rd fusion, his hair now longer and eyes with purple sclera. He had improved immensely in speed and agility, even healing naturally. Sakura knew that she was nowhere near his speed and only Ichigo seemed to be able to keep up with him as he had used what he called Bankai. But even that wasn't enough as he quickly reverted back to his original form after a few minutes fighting with Aizen. It had to do with the Hogyoku, she had thought. Naruto had joined the fight recently after temporarily dismantling Katsuro. He was also struggling to keep up with Aizen. The 2 bright-haired boys fought side by side, giving their all into defeating Aizen. The pink-haired kunoichi eyed the male Shinigami warily. Even though Aizen seemed to be fine, Sakura knew that he wasn't any better than Naruto and Ichigo. The only thing that kept him going was the Hogyoku. She eyed his wounds with a medic's eye. He seemed to be tiring and was becoming more reckless. She had a theory to confirm and hoped that Naruto and Ichigo would buy her enough time. He activated Sage Mode, growing more furious by the moment.
He couldn't a meaningful hit on him. He only managed to land a few blows.
He had to end this quickly. Forming a massive Rasengan which he was sure Pervy Sage would have been proud of, he jumped into the air towards Ichigo and Aizen who were fighting. Strawberry can barely keep up with him, the blonde Jinchuriki thought. Ichigo sensed Naruto coming behind and commenced to create a quick distraction that would distract Aizen, if only for a few seconds. He swung Zangetsu towards the brunette's neck and Aizen countered by crouching low enough to avoid the Zanpakuto. He immediately stood up and swung Kyoka Suigetsu in a vertical direction. Ichigo caught the Zanpakuto with his hands, closing his bleeding palms tightly around it. What is he trying to do? Aizen thought as he struggled with the orange-haired Shinigami who seemed intent on holding his Zanpakuto.
Let go, you imbecile, he sneered as he pulled his Zanpakuto from the Kurosaki. And no, he gasped, obviously being hurt by the Zanpakuto but deciding to hold on nonetheless. At that moment, Aizen's Shinigami senses picked up a movement behind him and he turned a second too late to see Naruto flying towards him. The Rasengan hit him squarely in the chest and sent him barreling into the ground, creating a large crater where he had crashed.
Naruto staggered onto his knees, physical and chakra exhaustion already weakening him all the more. Ichigo was beside him, his whole body propped up by his Zanpakuto. Are you okay? He asked the Shinigami. He nodded in return. The 2 watched Aizen struggle to stand up, his chest blackened due to the force of the Rasengan, the Hogyoku glistening slightly. You think a weakling like you can defeat me? He said, his teeth tainted red with blood. He refused to admit that the Rasengan had hurt him more than he had expected. They could not defeat him. They could never defeat him. He was Aizen. A weakling who couldn't even bring his friend back? He taunted, opting to manipulate the blonde. The first fight had been a nasty one. He had severely underestimated him, leaving him bedridden for 2 days. He had heard reports saying that there was a kid who went around killing hollows in a single blow.
After some digging and a brief investigation by Katsuro, he had come to know the blonde as Naruto Uzumaki, whom Katsuro had teleported here by accident. He was a Jinchuriki, Katsuro had told him. He harbored a demon called the Nine-Tailed Fox and decided to test the Jinchuriki. He had gotten more than he bargained and swore to defeat him the next time he saw him. A mere 16-year-old like Kurosaki could not defeat him, could never defeat him.
He saw Naruto stiffen immediately and knew he had found his mark. Katsuro had told him about the blonde's undying love for his fellow Uchiha teammate. "You cannot even bring Sasuke back, so how can you defeat me?" he asked with a sickeningly innocent face. The atmosphere immediately began to tense. Is this the power Katsuro had been talking about? He asked himself. The famous Uchiha Sasuke who left his village in search of power. You vowed to that girl to bring him back, didn't you? Yet you have not yet brought him back, he continued. Ah, but what can I say? How could you ever bring back someone you love when an actual fact is that you have a demon inside you? He said with a wicked smile. Oh wait, you don't have a demon. You actually are the demon, he said and laughed maniacally. The one thing he enjoyed the most was to show people how much of a demon they were. Each and every one of them had that demonic, evil side that they didn't want to embrace. He would help them to do that. Aren't I right, Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed beast which killed your parents and many other citizens of Konoha? He added. And that had been the final straw. Raw power burst in the whole area around him. He saw Naruto on all fours being cloaked in red, what he thought was the beast's power. Yes, that's it, he thought as he smirked. Show me your true colors, demon.
Your true powers, he said sadistically. Don't talk like you know anything about me, the blonde growled in a very inhumanly voice.
Before Aizen could bat an eyelash, the blonde was already in front of him. He only got a millisecond to study his blackened whiskers, red demonic eyes and long fangs before he was being face-punched skyward halfway into the sky. But before he went more than a few kilometers, he received a swiping kick which knocked the air out of him and sent him plummeting into the ground. The force of the crash created a shockwave such that the earth rumbled in return. The pain came at him full force that he felt his eyes water before he forcefully pushed the tears back. He could not be seen crying. Every muscle of his screamed and burned in pain. He had never felt this much pain before, such that he was surprised to still be alive. He remained motionless for a few moments, unable to move a single muscle before the Hogyoku's power suddenly filled him and eased the pain somehow by a pitiful fraction. He staggered up to see his attire completely obliterated with only his lower half still covered. He saw the blonde struggling in what seemed to be an internal battle, the demonic features flickering on and off on his battered face. The pink-haired girl was beside him in an instant, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. She said a few words which he could not make out and was sure didn't care whether he heard them or not. He secretly hoped that what she said would calm the angry shinobi. He had suddenly had the feeling that he did not want to taste that power. She looked at the blonde in a hard yet determined expression, her eyes ablaze with fire. And the next moment, he knew whom his next target was. He had to end this battle quickly. He looked at his Hogyoku and thought he saw a crack before dismissing the thought almost immediately. He eyed his next and searched around for his Zanpakuto whilst the two ninjas talked to themselves. Naruto, are you okay? Sakura asks, her face soft with concern. I'm okay. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, he said in a reassuring tone. Please don't scare me like that, she said in a soft voice. His heart broke at the sight. He knew her deep care for him and how she never wanted him to get hurt because of the Kyuubi. I won't, he replied, his face saying all words could never express. Leave the rest to me. I know how to defeat him, she said in a hard tone. Let me help you, he said. You've already done your part. Now it's my turn, she said. But Sakura, trust me on this one, she said, and that was all he needed to shut up. He knew that she never wanted him to doubt her power and he wasn't going to start now. Don't you think it's time to wrap this up? Aizen said as he stared hard at Sakura, who was standing a few meters away from him. I think it is, the kunoichi replied in a flat tone. I'm going to have to jump to the final fusion if I want to end this quickly, the brunette thought. Final fusion, he muttered, and immediately his body transformed. His forehead now hosted a third black vertical eye. The skin on his face had split open and pulled back around the sides of his head to reveal a blackened demon-like skull. He had 3 vertical holes running down his chest, the Hogyoku at the center of the top hole. His feet had become single claws and his hands blackened. He had a set of 6 sheet-like butterfly wings with eyes upon the center, adorned with hollow-like skulls and trailing into tendrils. His musculature had become more defined and his powerful ryotsu charged up the air around them. Sakura was the least bit phased. Jumping to the left, Naruto avoided a blow that would have likely killed him, his clone taking the place of the sacrificial lamb and immediately poofed out of existence. Aizen had come too early. How he had gotten information on their planned attack was still unknown. He had been sleeping his head off when his chakra senses picked up incoming beings with immense spiritual energy coming towards the house. Before he knew, they were being blasted by a ball of spiritual energy so much that the entire house was destroyed as well as the surrounding area. He had summoned Gamachiki at the last second, calling upon every ounce of his speed and teleported into the toad's belly. He had grabbed Rukia as quickly as he could, knowing that they were going to be injured anyway, but at least they could reduce the damage. Ichigo's family was fortunately on a vacation which Ichigo had arranged in order to fight Aizen without any disturbances. They weren't injured as such, they just looked like they had been in a hellhole. His black t-shirt and orange pants were slightly tattered and Rukia's Shinigami outfit looked the same as his.
Aizen had brought an army of hollows, some of which were unidentified hollow-feed Shinigami. Rukia had told him. He also brought his male counterparts, Jin and Konami. Being number 1 loudmouth ninja he was, the blonde vowed to defeat Aizen once and for all as well to protect his friends and the citizens.
Now he was involved in what might have been one of his toughest battles apart from pain. Rukia had immediately called for reinforcements from the Soul Society and was fighting tooth and nail against the Hollows, alongside Chad and Uryu. Reinforcements had arrived but Naruto didn't have time for an introduction. He had simply told them to deal with the Hollows and Aizen's counterparts whilst he would take care of the rogue Shinigami himself. Orihime had immediately arrived at the start of the battle only to be locked in a black coffin, courtesy of Aizen's Kido spell Kurohitsugi. She immediately collapsed after being released, barely a hair's breadth away from death. Naruto had wanted to rush to her but couldn't due to Aizen's constant attacks. They had moved from Karakura town, going to the open space where he had had sparring sessions with the Shinigamis. At that moment, he sensed Sakura's chakra signature and Ichigo's ryotsu and immediately his spirits lifted. They would come soon. Naruto formed a Rasengan in his hand, the clone vanishing just as soon and launched himself towards the Shinigami. Aizen fluidly dodged the attack, choosing to punch the blonde as soon as he dodged him. The Jinchuriki reeled backwards due to the force of the blow and crashed into the forest floor below. Aizen smirked as he watched the blonde struggle to regain his bearings. Enjoying it down there? He taunted. He had gotten some injuries of his own, having received a blow from the blue ball of spiritual energy and physical energy the blonde loved to use ever so much, chakra as Katsuro had told him.
Naruto stood up and glared at the Shinigami. Just what do you want from us? He all but shouted as he pointed an accusing finger at the brunette. You're a nuisance and I have to get rid of nuisances before they disturb me in my doings, the man replied smoothly as he smiled in what Naruto had associated as being a typical Orochimaru style. Which doings if I may ask? The blonde as he eyed the swordsman warily, his eyes hard.
I'm not stupid enough to tell you that. That's a secret for me, he responded. Just then, Aizen's ears tingled and he moved just in time to avoid a flying fist. The girl flipped in the air and landed smoothly on the ground, having missed her target by barely an inch. Sakura-chan! The blonde exclaimed as he rushed over to her. Sakura, seeing her best friend, smiled. Hey Naruto, she replied as she gave him a once-over, seeing that he wasn't severely injured. Ichigo landed beside them. Hey, the orange-haired boy said. Naruto acknowledged his presence with a nod. I see we have some visitors, Aizen said as he hovered on threesome below. It won't be a problem anyway. It means I'll have more beings to kill then, especially the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, he added. Their eyes widened but they were quick to recover. How do you know that? The blonde sputtered. Let me guess. It's Katsuro who told you, isn't it? Sakura spoke. How so? The brunette acts. I did some few researches on Katsuro and you as well. Katsuro was a failed experiment of Orochimaru whom you just happened to stumble upon when he accidentally teleported himself here. Then you modified him in order to use him for your own benefits. I read his file in Konoha. Noticing that he was commonly sighted around the Snake Sanin's previous hideouts, hence the conclusion that he was a failed experiment. The girl all but sneered. Very clever, Aizen commented. I see that forehead of yours houses a big brain, the man remarked snidely. Sakura fought back some profanities which she was sure would rival those of Hidan's. One thing you could not do was to insult her forehead. If that's the case, I don't see any reason why Katsuro should keep hiding. Come out then. As soon as he had said that, the rogue nin appeared beside Aizen in a flicker. Katsuro, the two ninjas sneered simultaneously in distaste. Naruto and Sakura, long time nay, the brown-haired ninja replied in a like manner. You brought us here on purpose, didn't you? Sakura snapped coldly.
Katsuro laughed, as in really hard. No, that was a mistake on my part.
I supposed to capture the infamous Uchiha brat, he corrected them as he wiped away some tears.
Uchiha brat, Sasuke, the two ninjas thought. Yes, it's that Sasuke Uchiha you're obsessed over, the ninja replied.
So, his name is Sasuke? Ichigo thought as he reflected on his previous conversations with the two ninjas.
You see, Orochimaru tried to create some time travel jutsus using the DNA of the Uchiha, who possessed their famous Sharingan, which was going to help him. However, Sasuke would not allow him any part of his DNA, so he had to steal without Sasuke knowing. However, his body wouldn't allow him to start working on the jutsus, and Kabuto didn't know how to do so, so he came upon a certain boy, Katsuro explained.
A lost kid whose parents he had deserted, who was looking for a purpose in life. That kid had precise chakra control which could almost rival that of the famous pink-haired medic Kunoichi of Konoha. So that boy performed those tasks instead. However, Orochimaru was not satisfied with the boy's progress, so he left him in the forest for the dead. What he didn't know was that the boy was beginning to perfect the time travel jutsus. Instead of shifting through time, he had shifted through dimensions, and thus he came upon Lord Aizen, who promised him to help use his talent more, instead of being used by Orochimaru. And I'm, as you all know, that boy happens to be me, Katsuro finished as he smirked. What were you going to do with Sasuke? Naruto asks, barely managing to control his anger at the thought of his best friend being used. Take his eyes and use them for whatever Lord Aizen deemed necessary, of course, the boy replied. Well, sorry. But we won't let you lay your hands on Sasuke, and we'll be sure to defeat you, Datbeo. The blonde shouted as he glared at him. I'd like to see you try, Katsuro said, and he rushed towards the blonde. Naruto, not being one to not have the first move, jumped towards the ninja and they met in hand-to-hand combat. Sakura chose not speak, instead opting to move silently towards the slightly distracted Aizen. She masked her chakra as she possibly could, and she jumped silently towards the floating Shinigami who was suspended in the air, aiming her fist towards. At the last moment, Aizen turned and caught her fist.
Sakura growled, pushing more chakra to her fist. She pushed as she struggled against his hold, hoping to throw him off balance. Your physical strength is quite impressive, the man commented as his hand slightly trembled due to the force. But it won't be enough to stop me, he added as he flicked his wrist, twisting her body with the small movement and throwing her over his shoulder. Sakura allowed herself to be flipped over, pulling her fist out of his grasp to try and punch him again.
Aizen dodged the fists which were coming his way at a considerably impressive speed, but not enough to stop. He detected a movement behind him and kicked Sakura in the stomach, sending her flying backwards, and turned to deflect Ichigo's Zanpakuto. Ichigo growled inaudibly, obviously displeased with his sneak attack being found out. The two Shinigamis exchanged blows as they floated in the sky. Aizen noticed that Ichigo's attacks were forcing him to move down to the ground. So that's how he wants to play, he thought as he landed on the ground, easily blocking Sakura's kick as soon as he had done that. He countered with a kick of his own, but the Kunoichi blocked it with her forearms, quickly sending her fist flying towards him as he retracted his leg. He dodged to the right, her fist meeting with the 10-ton boulder beside him. The whole thing turned to pebbles as it was completely obliterated, and Aizen watched in slight awe. How she had done that he didn't know, but from the fraction of what she could do he had seen, he knew he had to avoid getting hit at all costs. He slashed his sword and the girl jumped away from him, landing beside Ichigo with her face set in a permanent scowl of displeasure. The said redhead was standing beside her, his face one of seriousness. This battle just got interesting then, he thought, now more intent on avoiding the pink-haired girl's attacks. Sakura was temporarily out of the fight. After receiving a Kido spell which almost left hole on her chest, she had retreated to the ground, intent on watching Ichigo and Aizen fight in the sky, whilst she thought of a plan to lure Aizen into a trap. He seemed to be growing more powerful each time. He had already undergone the third fusion, his hair now longer and eyes with purple sclera. He had improved immensely in speed and agility, even healing naturally. Sakura knew that she was nowhere near his speed, and only Ichigo seemed to be able to keep up with him, as he had used what he called Bankai. But even that wasn't enough, as he quickly reverted back to his original form after a few minutes fighting with Aizen. It had to do with the Hogyoku, she had thought. Naruto had joined the fight recently after temporarily dismantling Katsuro. He was also struggling to keep up with Aizen. The two bright-haired boys fought side by side, giving their all into defeating Aizen. The pink-haired Kunoichi eyed the male Shinigami warily. Even though Aizen seemed to be fine, Sakura knew that he wasn't any better than Naruto and Ichigo. The only thing that kept him going was the Hogyoku. She eyed his wounds with a medic's eye. He seemed to be tiring and was becoming more reckless. She had a theory to confirm and hoped that Naruto and Ichigo would buy her enough time. He activated Sage Mode, growing more furious by the moment.
He couldn't a meaningful hit on him. He only managed to land a few blows.
He had to end this quickly. Forming a massive Rasengan which he was sure Pervy Sage would have been proud of, he jumped into the air towards Ichigo and Aizen, who were fighting. Strawberry can barely keep up with him, the blonde Jinchuriki thought. Ichigo sensed Naruto coming behind and commenced to create a quick distraction that would distract Aizen, if only for a few seconds. He swung Zangetsu towards the brunette's neck, and Aizen countered by crouching low enough to avoid the Zanpakuto. He immediately stood up and swung Kyoka Suigetsu in a vertical direction. Ichigo caught the Zanpakuto with his hands, closing his bleeding palms tightly around it. What is he trying to do? Aizen thought as he struggled with the orange-haired Shinigami, who seemed intent on holding his Zanpakuto. Let go, you imbecile, he sneered as he pulled his Zanpakuto from the Kurosaki. And no, he gasped, obviously being hurt by the Zanpakuto but deciding to hold on nonetheless. At that moment, Aizen's Shinigami senses picked up a movement behind him, and he turned a second too late to see Naruto flying towards him. The Rasengan hit him squarely in the chest and sent him barreling into the ground, creating a large crater where he had crashed. Naruto staggered onto his knees, physical and chakra exhaustion already weakening him all the more. Ichigo was beside him, his whole body propped up by his Zanpakuto. Are you okay? He asked the Shinigami. He nodded in return. The two watched Aizen struggle to stand up, his chest blackened due to the force of the Rasengan, the Hogyoku glistening slightly. You think a weakling like you can defeat me? He said, his teeth tainted red with blood. He refused to admit that the Rasengan had hurt him more than he had expected. They could not defeat him. They could never defeat him. He was Aizen. A weakling who couldn't even bring his friend back? He taunted, opting to manipulate the blonde. The first fight had been a nasty one. He had severely underestimated him, leaving him bedridden for 2 days. He had heard reports saying that there was a kid who went around killing hollows in a single blow. After some digging and a brief investigation by Katsuro, he had come to know the blonde as Naruto Uzumaki, whom Katsuro had teleported here by accident. He was a Jinchuriki, Katsuro had told him. He harbored a demon called the Nine-Tailed Fox and decided to test that Jinchuriki. He had gotten more than he bargained and swore to defeat him the next time he saw him. A mere 16-year-old like Kurosaki could not defeat him, could never defeat him. He saw Naruto stiffen immediately and knew he had found his mark. Katsuro had told him about the blonde's undying love for his fellow Uchiha teammate. You cannot even bring Sasuke back, so how can you defeat me? He asked with a sickeningly innocent face. The atmosphere immediately began to tense. Is this the power Katsuro had been talking about? He asked himself. The famous Uchiha Sasuke who left his village in search of power. You vowed to that girl to bring him back, didn't you? Yet you have not yet brought him back, he continued. Ah, but what can I say? How could you ever bring back someone you love when an actual fact is that you have a demon inside you? He said with a wicked smile. Oh wait, you don't have a demon. You actually are the demon, he said and laughed maniacally. The one thing he enjoyed the most was to show people how much of a demon they were. Each and every one of them had that demonic, evil side that they didn't want to embrace. He would help them to do that. Aren't I right, Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed beast which killed your parents and many other citizens of Konoha? He added. And that had been the final straw. Raw power burst in the whole area around him. He saw Naruto on all fours being cloaked in red, what he thought was the beast's power. Yes, that's it, he thought as he smirked. Show me your true colors, demon. Your true powers, he said sadistically. Don't talk like you know anything about me, the blonde growled in a very inhumanly voice. Before Aizen could bat an eyelash, the blonde was already in front of him. He only got a millisecond to study his blackened whiskers, red demonic eyes and long fangs before he was being face-punched skyward halfway into the sky. But before he went more than a few kilometers, he received a swiping kick which knocked the air out of him and sent him plummeting into the ground. The force of the crash created a shockwave such that the earth rumbled in return. The pain came at him full force that he felt his eyes water before he forcefully pushed the tears back. He could not be seen crying. Every muscle of his screamed and burned in pain. He had never felt this much pain before, such that he was surprised to still be alive. He remained motionless for a few moments, unable to move a single muscle before the Hogyoku's power suddenly filled him and eased the pain somehow by a pitiful fraction. He staggered up to see his attire completely obliterated with only his lower half still covered. He saw the blonde struggling in what seemed to be an internal battle, the demonic features flickering on and off on his battered face. The pink-haired girl was beside him in an instant, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. She said a few words which he could not make out and was sure didn't care whether he heard them or not. He secretly hoped that what she said would calm the angry shinobi. He had suddenly had the feeling that he did not want to taste that power. She looked at the blonde in a hard yet determined expression, her eyes ablaze with fire. And the next moment, he knew whom his next target was. He had to end this battle quickly. He looked at his Hogyoku and thought he saw a crack before dismissing the thought almost immediately. He eyed his next and searched around for his Zanpakuto whilst the two ninjas talked to themselves. Naruto, are you okay? Sakura asks, her face soft with concern. I'm okay. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, he said in a reassuring tone. Please don't scare me like that, she said in a soft voice. His heart broke at the sight. He knew her deep care for him and how she never wanted him to get hurt because of the Kyuubi. I won't, he replied, his face saying all words could never express. Leave the rest to me. I know how to defeat him, she said in a hard tone. Let me help you, he said. You've already done your part. Now it's my turn, she said. But Sakura, trust me on this one, she said, and that was all he needed to shut up. He knew that she never wanted him to doubt her power and he wasn't going to start now. Don't you think it's time to wrap this up? Aizen said as he stared hard at Sakura, who was standing a few meters away from him. I think it is, the kunoichi replied in a flat tone. I'm going to have to jump to the final fusion if I want to end this quickly, the brunette thought. Final fusion, he muttered, and immediately his body transformed. His forehead now hosted a third black vertical eye. The skin on his face had split open and pulled back around the sides of his head to reveal a blackened demon-like skull. He had 3 vertical holes running down his chest, the Hogyoku at the center of the top hole. His feet had become single claws and his hands blackened. He had a set of 6 sheet-like butterfly wings with eyes upon the center, adorned with hollow-like skulls and trailing into tendrils. His musculature had become more defined and his powerful Ryotsu charged up the air around them. Sakura was the least bit phased. She knew that she had a snowball's chance in hell against Aizen, but one thing she would never do was go down without a fight. Tsunade had taught her that. Naruto had taught her that. Kakashi had taught her that. Ino had taught her that. Sasuke had taught her that. She had taught herself that. She was never going to give up. Besides, she always had an ace up her sleeve. Her master was a gambler after all. Pushing chakra to her feet, Sakura was quick to implement her plan. She jumped towards the Shinigami with a chakra-laden fist poised and ready. Aizen met her head on and the two exchanged quick blows. She was glad for Tsunade's brash training and her fight with Sasori because it increased her speed in taijutsu. She dodged and countered with her own. Soon enough, as she had predicted, Aizen brought his transformed Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu. She took a kunai from her pouch and braced herself for his attack. With incredible speed that had she not put her hearing senses into use she would not have heard or seen him, Aizen appeared from behind her, his Zanpakuto aiming at her neck. She ducked at the last second, spinning to drive a chakra-infused punch into his chest which sent him careening backwards. He flipped in the air before he could crash and landed neatly onto the ground, a smile dancing on his lips. Sakura glared at him. hating the man for the sake of being evil. She knew he had a trick up his sleeve. Yet again, he disappeared before her very eyes and came at her from all sides, slashing at every part he wanted with lightning speed. She was unable to deflect a single blow and received it full force. After a moment or so, he flickered a good distance away from her and watched as she fell flat on her face, the ground being slowly drenched in her blood which was oozing from her wounds.
I don't have much time left, the kunoichi thought as she mentally ran a brief scan of her injuries. She remained flat on the ground, unable to move a single muscle. She thought of healing herself but decided that she would use every last bit of her chakra to kill the bastard and thus resorted to letting her body heal naturally. Katsuro tells me that you're immune to illusions. Let's see how good you are, Aizen said as he smirked. Complete hypnosis, he muttered.
Sakura suddenly found herself in Konoha. Wasn't she fighting Aizen a few moments ago? Or wait, had she been dreaming? She walked around the streets of Konoha, taking in the bustling and activity. Everyone seemed happy, that was good. She passed Ino and her teammates and waved to them. It was good to be here. She found Ichigo and his gang at Ichiraku's. Naruto as usual was there. She greeted them. But what were they doing in Konoha? Weren't they supposed to be in Karakura town? She sat beside Ichigo and listened to Naruto describe ramen in all its beauty and glory. Hey Sakura, a voice said behind her. She turned around to meet face to face with an all too familiar face.
Sasuke-kun, she breathed, her face one of pure shock. Surprised, he said as he took a seat beside her. She stumbled for words. He slid an arm around her shoulder. I missed you, he said as he snuggled into the crook of her shoulder. His breath felt hot against her skin and she flushed in embarrassment. Sasuke-kun, what are you doing? She asked breathlessly. I love you Sakura, I've always loved you, he said.
Since when did Sasuke return her feelings? That was a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. So this is it, huh? You're just gonna leave me for him? Sakura turned at the sound of Ichigo's voice. Everyone was looking at them. What? She stuttered. You're gonna forget everything that happened between us. He sneered. What had happened between them? What were they even doing here? I would never forget, she found herself saying. So who's it gonna be? Me or him? The redhead said, his words laced with anger and betrayal. She should just choose Sasuke, he was her first love after all. But Ichigo loved her the way Sasuke could never do to her. But then this Sasuke loved her so she should choose. It's that traitor, isn't it? He yelled at her. He stood up and shoved his chair away, storming off to God knows where. She sighed in exasperation. What had she done? But things weren't making sense. Why wasn't Naruto and the others speaking, looking at her robotically? Why did time seem to have frozen? Everything had suddenly stopped moving. She turned to look at Sasuke and found his face strangely odd. His features were sharper, skin more darker and eyes with a hint of brown.
His features twisted and spun into Aizen's face. She snarled and swung a fist at him but it never reached him. She just patted him on his face. Aizen smirked and stabbed her with his zanpakuto. What's happening? Why wasn't her body moving? He stabbed her once, twice, thrice. The pain was unbearable. It felt all too real. What's happening? She screamed in her mind. She dropped to the ground with a yell. Her head hurt terribly. It felt like she had been put in Itachi's infinite Tsukuyomi. Sakura-chan. She heard a startled yell but chose to ignore it. She staggered onto her feet which felt like jelly. She was almost there. She couldn't give up just yet. Not giving up. Aizen asked with a taunting voice. And no, she croaked in a harsh voice. She was almost there. I guess you really do live up to your name. No one is able to break out of my illusions unless I will for it to happen or they touch my zanpakuto before I cast the illusion. He explained. Yeah, I guess so, the kunoichi replied through labored breaths. Now it's time for the grand finale, he said and Sakura rose fully. Aizen noted a purple diamond on her large forehead. Was it some sort of power-up? He didn't care. She was going to die anyway. Feel my power, Frager, he yelled. Sakura felt Ryotsu hum in the air. Bluish-purple energy spheres formed from the top of his hollow-like skulls on his wings. There were about 6 of them. Just from looking she knew that if she was struck by one of those, she was as good as dead. He released and they came flying at her in a zigzag pattern. Once again, thanks to Tsunade's brash training,
She dodged all of the flying balls of energy. As soon as they hit the ground, they exploded and created large craters which was almost the size of all the training grounds in Konoha combined. The explosion was so loud that she was temporarily deaf. She guessed that someone halfway across the country would hear them. At least they were a fair distance away from Karakura town. Before she could continue her line of thought, Aizen was already in front her. What? She thought. How had he gotten in front of her? Time for you to die, sweetheart, he said with a sick smile. His wings immediately surrounded her before she could escape. In a second, the bluish-purple Ryotsu had already gathered around her in a ring. The ring vibrated with power and solidified. She felt 3 more large solid rings gather around her in concentric. Was this the end? No, because she had accessed all of her chakra in her yin before it was mature and had the strength of 100 seal on her forehead. Tsunade would bash her head. She wasn't going to die, but it was going to hurt like hell. Oh well, no pain no gain. Biting the inside of her cheek, pain erupted around her in large bursts. She might have as well be in hell cause it was hurting that she was paralyzed. She couldn't even form a single sound. Aizen stared at his victim in his ultrafragor. It was his ultimate weapon. No one could ever survive that. She was covered in the powerful Ryotsu which hummed and buzzed in a melodic mand. Yes. Yes. That's it, he yelled as he laughed maniacally. Naruto remained rooted to his spot, watching in absolute horror. There was no way that she would ever survive that. If she died, God, he wasn't to forgive himself. How would he return to Konoha without her? Tsunade and Ino, among others, would have his head on a silver platter. Gosh, he should have never let her fight alone. He should have just protected her and died in her stead. Tears stinged his eyes and he felt no need to wipe them away. He caught a glimpse of Ichigo who had the same horrified look on his face, probably thinking the same thing as he was. Aizen smirked in delight as the light around her grew even darker. But his delight turned into horror as a hand stuck out of the rings and went right through his chest. He stared in shock. What was the only thought in his mind. Soon enough, the rings died away, leaving behind a smirking Sakura who had black markings running down from her forehead all around her body. She was steaming and he heard a faint sizzling sound. Crack. He stared at the hand at his chest, where the Hogyoku was. Her hand was wrist deep into his chest and was coated with a layer. Crack. Crack. And finally, crack. Sakura pulled out her hand from his chest. He stared in utter shock. How had she been able to survive his ultimate attack? Why was she still alive? She opened her palm in front of him to reveal the Hogyoku, only to reveal fragmented pieces which were beyond repair. He stood there paralyzed, unable to move a single muscle as all the energy had been taken away from him. It ends now, she said with a victorious smirk. That was the last thing he heard as he saw her grab his throat in one fluid motion. She snapped it clean and Aizen dropped down to the ground lifeless. Sakura stared at him in bewilderment. She had done it. She had killed Aizen. She had saved Ichigo and Rukia's world. She had really done it. Sakura-chan, she heard voices shouting. But she was too elated to turn. She was a hero. She had saved the world. With that last thought in her mind, she allowed herself to succumb to the welcoming darkness. She stirred. Her body felt numb. She tried to pry her eyes open. But they seemed to have stuck together. After what seemed like an eternity, her bleary eyes opened. Her foggy mind tried to process her environment as she sat up. Where was she? She must have passed out or something. She appeared to be in a room of sorts. It was traditional room, she guessed as she took in the tatami mats and the fusuma doors. She was sitting on a futon. She looked down at herself and found every bit of her skin bandaged. She tried to stand up but her legs didn't even move a millimeter. Just then a sound interrupted her pathetic attempt of trying to move. She turned around to meet face to face with Orihime. Sakura, she exclaimed, dropping the clothes she held and rushed over to the kunoichi. Sakura found herself enveloped in a bone-crushing hug. It hurt a bit but she decided to endure just for a little moment. Soon enough, several footsteps were heard outside her room and she saw Rukia, Chad and Uryu enter. Sakura. The female Shinigami exclaimed and rushed over to her. Hey Rukia, she croaked in a hoarse voice. Rukia gave her a teary smile as she held her hand. Sakura, how are you? Uryu asked as he knelt beside her. I'm fine, she replied with a weak smile. Suddenly, the fusuma door was opened with great force. Where is she? A voice bellowed. Sakura turned her head at the sound of her best friend's voice. Naruto, she said as her eyes blurred with tears. Sakura-chan, he said as he rushed over to envelope her in a bear hug. He was careful to avoid pressing her too much. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you get hurt, he said, his words laced with sincerity that almost broke her heart as he hugged her closer. It's okay. I'm fine now, she replied as she buried her face in his chest. He smells nice, she thought. Sakura. Another voice said. She pulled away from Naruto, blinking away her tears, and looked at the redhead who was looking at her with bewildered eyes.
Ichigo, she breathed. Everyone had quietened around them. Ichigo stood frozen from his spot at the door. She was awake. She was finally awake after so long. Seeing that the Shinigami made no movement, Sakura forced herself to stand up. Her feet felt like jelly and hurt as though she was being struck by 1,000 senbon. Several exclaims of, "Sakura, you're hurt," rang in the room, but she chose to ignore them. She noticed that she was dressed in a black yukata.
She took several baby steps before her knees gave out and she slumped down. But before she could hit the ground, arms had encircled her from the front and helped her kneel on the ground. She looked up to see Ichigo staring at her with the most intense look she had ever seen. "Hey," she said in a weak voice. Her only reply was being hugged fiercely. She returned the hug with the same force, which surprised everyone including herself. He pulled her closer and she snuggled deeper into his chest. "Don't ever do that again," he said in a strained tone, inner conflict and turmoil in his voice. "I won't," she replied in a reassuring tone. "How long was I passed out?" she asked Naruto, who was standing beside her. "They preparing to meet with the captains. They were in the Soul Society." "About 3 weeks," he replied in a matter-of-fact tone. 3 weeks? She said disbelievingly. He nodded. She had just woken up a week ago, meaning they had been here for almost a month. Gosh, she said to herself. They were dressed in the ninja attire which had been sewn by the tailor there and had their konoha hites proudly on top of their heads. "What happened to Katsuro?" she asked. "He's dead," the blonde replied in a monotone voice. "One of the energy balls from the Frager hit him," he explained. "Oh," she said. "You may enter," a voice said from inside. The two looked at each other before opening the door and entering. There were about 11 people who she sensed as very powerful, 6 sitting on one side in a traditional style.
There were also other people sitting behind them. At the head, there was an old man who was sat in a dominating manner.
She also noticed Rukia, Ichigo, Orihime, Uryu and Chad sitting alongside the other 11 plus many others she didn't recognize. There was a busty blonde with orange hair who was staring at her with something akin to amusement. A guy with red hair was looking at her skeptically. There were also several raven heads in the room and a smiling pink-haired little girl sitting on a bulky guy's shoulder. Creepy, they both thought. The two sat in the middle and stared straight at the head. "Greetings to you. My name is Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, Captain Commander of the 1st Division and Captain of Gote 13. The elder man introduced himself in gruff voice. "Chojiro Sasaki, Lieutenant of the 1st Division, the man beside him said. "Soi Fan, Captain of the 2nd Division. Marichio Omeda, Lieutenant of the 2nd Division. "Retsu Yunohana, Captain of the 4th Division. Isane Kotetsu, Lieutenant of the 4th Division. "Byakuya Kuchiki, Captain of the 6th Division. "Renji Abarai, Lieutenant of the 6th Division. "Saijin Komamura, Captain of the 7th Division. "Tetsuzaemon Iba, Lieutenant of the 7th Division. "Shinsui Kyoraku, Captain of the 8th Division. "Naneo Eyes, Lieutenant of the 8th Division. "Kanami Tosen, Captain of the 9th Division. "Shuhei Hasagi, Lieutenant of the 9th Division. "Toshiro Hitsugaya, Captain of the 10th Division. "Rangaku Matsumoto, Lieutenant of the 10th Division.
Kenpachi Zaraki, Captain of the 11th Division. Yakiru Kusajishi, Lieutenant of the 11th Division.
"Mayuri Kuratsuchi, Captain of the 12th Division. "Nemu Kuratsuchi, Lieutenant of the 12th Division. "Jashiro Yukataki, Captain of the 13th Division. "Rukia Kuchiki, Lieutenant of the 13th Division." Sakura almost forgot their names. They were so long, but she managed to recite them all. She guessed Naruto had been lost as soon as the leader said his name. Sakura Haruno, Chunin of Konohagakure no Sado, the Kunoichi, introduced herself. Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage of Konohagakure no Sado, Datbeo. The blonde introduced himself loudly. Quiet down, you baka. The pink-haired medic seethed hotly and smacked him on top of his head, momentarily forgetting where she was. Gomen Sakura-chan, the blonde whimpered. A cough from Ichigo brought her back to reality. Sorry, she said to Yamamoto as she smiled sheepishly. Gomen Nasai, the blonde said in a low after receiving a glare from the medic. It's okay. I would like to thank you on behalf of the Soul Society in our world for defeating Aizen. You defeated one of our greatest threats, the elder Shinigami said. You're welcome, the two ninjas replied as they both bowed. If you don't mind me asking, how exactly did you defeat him? The man with dark hair and a pink floral kimono on top of his Shinigami attire Shinsui X. Naruto looked at Sakura expectantly, which prompted her to speak. I used chakra, she replied. Chakra is a combination of both spiritual and physical energy, unlike Ryotsu, which is only spiritual energy.
Because chakra consists of two interjoined parts, it is more powerful than Ryotsu because of the presence of the additional physical energy, she went on.
I first noticed this when Naruto grazed Rukia's side with his Rasengan. It was a small graze, but the damage was quite serious. As I encountered many hollows, I studied why they seemed to be easily defeated when Naruto and I attacked. I came to the conclusion that it was chakra. During my fight with Aizen, I decided to test my theory again. When Naruto hit him with the Rasengan, the Hogyoku cracked only a tiny bit. At that moment, I knew how to defeat him. I had lure him close enough to him that I would have access to the Hogyoku and ultimately kill him, she explained. Everyone seemed to nod at her words. I also have the strength of 100 healings technique. It allows the user to survive any attack through recreating any injured part such that you can even survive being cut in half. My master taught me that. Even mine was still premature. I could tap into it at the last second and deliver the final blow. Plus, Aizen was getting reckless and he sort of underestimated me, so it was easy, she finished, smiling at the last part. After a moment of silence, Yamamoto spoke up. Quite impressive, if I may say, the elder commented with a grandfatherly smile. Sakura blushed lightly. Now on to more urgent matters. One of your own by the name encountered Katsuro worked with Aizen to bring you here, am I correct? The man said. They both nodded. I hear that he died during the attack of the Frager, he said. They nodded again. I'm sure both of you want to return to your own world, he spoke. Their faces immediately brightened up. I have spoken with all the captains and we've discovered a way for you to get back home, Yamamoto said with a smile.
Sakura beamed and Naruto grinned cheekily. We are to proceed as soon as possible if we want this technique to work, but I guess you have to say goodbye to your friends. So maybe we can delay a bit, the elder said. Thank you very much, Yamamoto Taiko, the pinkett said. Yeah, thanks Oji-san, Datbeo. The blonde exclaimed as he gave him a thumbs up. Sakura bonked him in return, which made everyone laugh in return.
I guess this is goodbye then, Sakura said as she stared at her friends for the final time. They were standing at an open space away from the town. The captains were on the other side, waiting for them to bid each other farewell. No one replied her and she had no problem with that. They didn't want to part but they had to. Goodbye Sakura, Chad said as he stepped forward and hugged her gently. Goodbye Chad. Take care, she replied. Goodbye Sakura, Uryu said as he also stepped forward after Chad had retreated at the back of the group. Goodbye, she replied as she also hugged him. Sakura turned to Orihime, who was looking at her with tearful eyes. Goodbye Sakura. Take care of Ino and all your friends, and tell them I said Hiei, the orange-haired girl said as she embraced the pinkett. I will, she said as she returned the hug, her eyes stinging with tears. Don't give up on Ichigo, the medic Nin whispered in her ear. I won't, she replied in a teary voice. The kunoichi moved to Rukia, who was smiling, though her face displayed a huge amount of inner turmoil. Goodbye Rukia. It was such an honor meeting you, Lieutenant, the pinkett said as she pulled her into a hug. It was nice meeting you too, the raven-haired girl replied. Take care of Ichigo for me, the kunoichi whispered in her ear. Sure. You take care of Naruto for me, the girl replied. Always, Sakura replied. She turned to Ichigo, who had a faraway look in his eyes. Ichigo, she started. It's okay. You don't have to wish me well. I'll be fine here. You just make sure to take good care of yourself at home, he said as he gave her a tender smile. Sakura smiled in return. It was nice meeting you, the Shinigami said as he hugged her. Sakura returned her fifth hug that time in less than 10 minutes. Naruto gave each of them farewell handshakes and even Orihime a quick hug. He wasn't much of a goodbye person. Though it pained him to leave them, he had to go back to Konoha. That's where he belonged. With clueless Sai, Kakashi-sensei, Captain Yamato, Pervy Sage, Granny Tsunade and Sasuke Teme. He turned to Rukia and the girl avoided looking at him. "Rukia," he said softly. She turned and looked at him with teary eyes. "I guess this is goodbye then," he said as he stepped closer to her. "Yeah, I guess so," she replied in a quiet tone. Seeing that he couldn't use the talk no jutsu to express his feelings, he decided to take the big step. He had read it countless times in Pervy Sage's novels and hoped that he wouldn't lose his head. He could do it. He was a ninja with gutsiness. Surely this thing wouldn't scare him, right? He closed the distance between the two of them and placed a soft, slightly forceful kiss on her lips. It lasted for 5 seconds and he withdrew. He looked at Rukia who was gaping at him like a fish out of water with flushed cheeks. "Be baka." She seethed with feigned anger as she punched him on top of his head. "That hurt," Naruto said as he rubbed the sore spot, but he caught a smile on her flushed face. He smiled in return. The two ninjas were standing at the edge of a cliff. "We're going to open a portal to your world, but it'll only last for 15 seconds, so be quick." "Are you ready?" Yamamoto asked. They nodded. He placed his Zanpakuto in front of them before stepping to the side. He muttered a few inaudible words and slammed his palms together. The two began to glow white. "Take care," he said as the two began to fade. They turned to see everyone waving at them. They waved back. Sakura connected eyes with Ichigo. An unspoken communication passed between them. She had to do it. Pushing Chakra to her feet, she ran towards Ichigo. She ignored the several gasps of shock. Just before she faded completely, she stood in front of him and placed a well-deserved kiss on his lips. Ichigo stared at the smiling girl in shock before she completely faded away. A beat passed before Renji came from behind Ichigo and slung an arm over his shoulder. "Ah, I never knew you were the lovey-dovey type," he teased as he grinned. His reply was being punched off the cliff. They were falling and they found themselves in the Hokage's office. "Naruto. Sakura. What are you doing here?" Shizune exclaimed as she eyed the two ninjas who lay on top of each in the middle of Tsunade's office. "You better have a good explanation for this to come to days early of your mission," the blonde sneered annoyedly. The two ninjas stood up and looked around the office. "We're back home," Sakura exclaimed. "Oji-san did it, Datbeo," the blonde said as he punched the air. Tsunade stared at them quizzically. Sorry Shisho," Sakura said as she smiled cheekily, sensing her Shisho's dangerous aura. "Care to explain why you're home early and overjoyed to be here?" The blonde tried to control her temper. "We traveled to another dimension, Datbeo," Naruto exclaimed loudly. Hokage and assistant eyed them as though they had grown a second head. Boy, they had a lot to explain. "Thanks."